We're streaming, it's an open streaming song. We're streaming. I don't think it can be wrong. I'm making up a tune, I hope you'll like it. I can't think of a rhyme. Something Mike it. Sometimes I'm good at this, but not right now. We'll continue the stream anyhow. Thanks for tuning in, guys. I always feel a little bit guilty because now I'm doing like these great opening songs for the people who are like watching the recording later, but the people who tune into the live stream, they never actually get to see this. Just gonna double check, make sure the stream's going okay, make sure the stream's happening. Okay, looks good. What a day I have been having today, man. I gotta stop talking to people in internet forums and internet messaging, right? I just gotta stop with that. Because, like, you're always gonna talk to, like, the worst type of person. I'm just starting to realize this. Like I'm literally having conversations with people about the tent cities that exist here in Toronto. And that people are saying to me, get a job. Like, literally, that's their response. Like, they're walking by people who are living in tents, and their response is, just get a job. And if you turn around and say to these people, like, hey, did you know that many of the people who are living in these tent cities actually do have jobs? Right? Hey, Gordon, how you doing today, bud? Thanks for popping in. Go work for an aristocrat. Yeah, go work for a capitalist who's going to abandon you the second anything happens, right? And, like, a lot of these people, like, a big reason why the long-term care home system, like, and we have a report from our military who went into the long-term care homes, and a big reason why the long-term care homes, especially the privatized ones, got hit with COVID is because many of the people who work there live in shelters, right? So they go to the shelters, they go to sleep there, and then they come and they work in the long-term care homes. Like, what do you think is happening? And so people who are walking around telling me, like, when I'm talking about tent cities, Trudeau towns as I call them, they're telling me to get a job. I'm just like, what the fuck is wrong with your brain? Like, there's something wrong with your brain. And then you keep talking to them and you realize, like, oh, these are people who just, like, went to school, got a job given to them by, like, their dad or something, and all they've ever done is act as a yes man, right? And I'm steadily starting to call these people the yes men of the apocalypse, right? Like, the yes men of the apocalypse are just absolutely going to do everything they can to destroy us, while insisting that the solution is to get a job. Right? Like, oh man, it's just getting, like, grotesque in its stupidity. And that's really what it is. It's like, they're just saying get a job and, like, smirking and being like, just get a job. And it's just a way for them to not actually think about what's happening in the world. That, like, they are a beneficiary of a system because they are the yes men of the apocalypse. All they've ever done is go, yes sir, and they don't have a personality. They don't have hey Robin, how you doing? Sleep's been weird, so I haven't been here live, but I caught all the VODs. I'm gonna have to steal sociopath class from now on, by the way. Honestly, Robin, oh, thank God. Let's spread that around. Like, these people are not capitalists, right? They're not capitalists. They're like feudal lords, right? And they're sociopaths. Just got to be a grunt worker and turn the gears of the war machine. Exactly, Gordon. Exactly, bud. Like, unreal, right? Like, we're all go and shut up because we are greedy fascists who want the lucre. the lucre of that machine. Well, and it's so dumb because, like, this class of people, right? Like, the machine that they've made turns against them as well. Like, this is the thing that they're not realizing, right? They're so detached, and they have such a short-term way of viewing the world Like, capitalists really only plan like quarter by quarter. They have no long-term plans. They have no long-term ambitions or ideas. Um, and they've built a machine that they believe is benefiting them because they've got nice cars and nice houses and they get to go to Jeffrey Epstein's pedophile farm and like all this kind of stuff. And so they're like, man, I'm really living the high life. What a great life. But they're building a machine that ultimately destroys them too. Like, that's the thing that is so shocking about all of this. And like, when they die, their legacy is going to, like, I take a look at somebody like George W. Bush, and I'm like, yep, Mussolini, Hitler, George W. Bush, right? Like, those guys are on the same tier, and like they're not gonna walk away from like at the end of their lives. Like, I think about the Koch brothers. One of the Koch brothers died. I forget which one. And these guys, like, are nightmare sociopaths, right? Like, these guys literally funded massive anti-climate change campaigns to deny the existence of climate change. They should be, like, they should be arrested and tried in The Hague for crimes against humanity, like, without a doubt. And so one of them died, thankfully. The other one's still alive, and he releases an interview where he basically apologizes for his actions and says, it was wrong of me to do that. And I'm just like, oh, it's good. Like, it's good that you're confessing. Like, so we just need to go arrest this guy and put him in jail now, right? And like, their legacy is, their environmental footprint, that's their legacy, and the deprivation of progressive policies that they impeded with their greedy policy preferences. Yeah, for sure. For sure. I always find it funny when people retract messages, Gordon. Like, all you said was, aha! Like, that's fine. My chat's not so, like, overwhelmed yet that I'm not telling people quite yet. Like, sometimes I go into people's chats, and it's just like a stream of, like, LOLs and emojis and, like, nonsense. And I genuinely hope that my chat does not turn into that. I really, really hope that, because I like to read people's comments. I like to talk to people in the chat. And I just hope it never turns into just, like, stream of emojis. Hey, Lonnie, how you doing today? Good to see you. And Robin, I'm glad that you're going to latch on to sociopath class, because I've been feeling a little isolated on that recently. I've been feeling kind of weird about, I call it's a capitalist death cult. It's absolutely a death cult. What else could it be, right? Like, it's a society that has geared itself. Heidelman, you actually made the live stream, bud. Good to see you. Good to see you, bud. But, like, what else would you call a society that has structured itself to dismantle itself and then destroy the species? Like, what else do you call this society but a death cult? It's become very difficult for me to see it as anything else. And then when people come up and I'm, like, talking about this stuff and they say, "I'll just get a job, like, you lazy parasite," and I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, first of all, why should anyone work for a system that's going to destroy them, right? And that is actively destroying and abandoning them. And then on top of that, like, we already have jobs. Like, we're already doing stuff. It's just not stuff that benefits the capitalist class, which is gearing itself to destroy us. So, yeah, Gordon, liberal, exactly. Yeah, people need to stop tiptoeing around them. Like, and this worship of CEOs and billionaires, like, they don't work. Like, they don't do anything, right? Like, if you're a CEO and you're making, like, $25 million, right? And there's, like, a genuine problem that occurs in the business that you're overseeing, well, you just hire someone. That's it, right? That's your whole job. Your whole job as a CEO is that when a problem becomes big enough that you actually have to deal with it, you just hire somebody to do it, right? And, like, you go do some interviews every so often, like, but like, you're not working, like, you're not actually providing any value. You're just all you're doing is overseeing this wage slave process. No death cult equals liberal. Capitalism is liberalism. They are free to oppress and be shitheads. I mean, liberalism is essentially just conservatism, like wagging a little pride flag, right? It literally pretends to and means aristocratic. The appeased grunt is an aristocrat by definition. And even the meandering buying. Yeah, I'm so despondent that we're moving into opening up here in Ontario, and it is like people are like, boy, I can't wait for capitalism to happen again. And I'm like, oh, really? Like, I go into these, like, shops, like, when I go grocery shopping, like, ugh. I have such a hard time interacting with the people who are working there because they're wage slaves. Like, that's what they are. And people, like, pro-capitalist people have completely deluded themselves into believing that their system is based on consent, that people are consenting to this arrangement. And it's like, no, they're not. The whole market is owned and dominated by a billionaire class, which withholds food and shelter. And if you don't work for them, you don't get to eat, right? Workers starve. Real consensual, right? And it's a complete delusion. And it's a delusion. I mean, we shouldn't be surprised. You think back on your whole life, right? When you first started, you're a little kid. Everybody tells you about Santa Claus, right? Santa Claus is this delusion that they teach kids. And, you know, everybody expects that eventually you'll break out of that delusion. And, you know, we all have a good time lying to children in this way, that we teach them magic is real, we tell them about this, and eventually they come to realize, like, there is no Santa Claus. But then it continues for many people, right? And how does it continue? Well, Jesus Christ, right? The Jesus Christ delusion. And then if you can believe in the Jesus Christ delusion, then you can believe anything. That there is no delusion that you can't get told about. And you can be deluded into believing that the system that you're in is consensual. You can be deluded into believing that everybody is going around, you know, on equal terms, agreeing to what's happening to them. When the reality is, it's a wage slave system. Minus the food principle. In every other sense, we are deprived. I think we have an expectation to grow our own food, but to privatize the lucre. You keep using this, lucre. The lucre of society, right? Like, I don't think I've ever seen this word used in this context. What are some of my preferable videos to suggest for my channel? Oh, wow. No one has ever asked me that before, Gordon. That's a really good question. Well, let's go to my channel. What a great question. I don't know why.
I'm here in the Democratic Republic of the Congo.
No. I know, dude. I do daily channel. I do daily stuff. I do daily stuff. I've been hovering around 520 subscribers all week, and it's driving me crazy. Rex Murphy is a white supremacist is a good video. I'm actually quite proud of that video. This interview, Organized to Fight Capitalism, it's only got 59 views, but Barry is a really, really good. He's been fighting the good fight for a long, long time. It was a real pleasure to interview him. He's very intelligent, very smart. Socialist Action is an organization that should become larger and more prominent in our political discourse. So there's one. Oh, this one here, We've Abandoned the Disabled. It's a short one, but it's a real beauty. I was really nervous when I made it. This happens all the time to me, where I'll make a video, and you can see it's got 394 views. I'll make a video that has that kind of emotional punch because it's a song, right? I went to this disabled rally or gathering that was organized by this lady here, Isabella Gamp, and one of the speakers played a song, and so I was inspired by that, and so I took the song and And so I took the song and I did my own rendition of it and then put clips over top of it because I felt really weird speaking on their behalf. Like, they had done wonderful speeches and they'd done wonderful stuff, and so I just put this music onto it. And so then I put that up, and I think people are really attracted to that format. But what always happens, right? So I'll put something like that up, and what happens is that it attracts a lot of liberals, right? Because liberals love that kind of stuff. They really eat that kind of stuff up, where they're like, oh wow, it's a song, and I feel so, it evokes emotion, and oh, I have emotion now, and disabled people, and oh my goodness, yeah, it's so good, oh my goodness, won't somebody think of the disabled people? But then they keep, so so I get a bunch of subscribers, but then I start talking, the capitalist death cult destroys us through the Canada Infrastructure Bank. That's, please watch that one. The Canada Infrastructure Bank is actually one of the more important institutions that have been erected through this period, and nobody knows about it. It is a fascist institution that has entrenched wealth into the society. And I have dedicated, I'm going to be doing weekly videos on the Canada Infrastructure Bank until the rest of the leftists start to actually glom onto this and start talking about the Canada Infrastructure Bank as well. Because there's dead silence. It's like complete radio silence. I believe there's been a total of 5 articles written about it here in Canada, and it's an insane institution that has no business existing at all, and yet it exists. Anyway, so I start talking about things like this, and I start talking about liberals, and so I lose a bunch of the people who jump on board because they're like, oh, feelings and songs, and I love feelings and songs, and this guy's making me feel with songs. And then I'm like, yeah, and by the way, liberals are shit, right? Liberals are trash. And, oh, that's nice to hear, Lonnie. Yeah. If you care about Destiny, like if you're one of these people who actually cares about Destiny, that's a good video. Because Destiny is just like, he's just a dumb liberal. Like that's sort of the quintessential endpoint of like, Destiny just is literally like a kid whose parents allowed him to pursue this video game thing, and it worked out. He made a bunch of money on video game stuff, and now he's taken that money and he just invests it. And he has no critical analysis of the system that he's in. He's never worked a day in his life, right? And if you actually start to tell him what life looks like outside of the little gated palace that he lives in, he can't actually comprehend it. His scope and perspective of the world is through this incredibly narrow lens, and so he ends up being kind of a moron liberal, right? Yeah, and Wolf knows his business, right? Like, that's just it. Wolf is a professional, and he's like a total business. Well, it wasn't a debate, right? Like, that's the big thing. It just wasn't really a debate. And the serfs, honestly, he has dedicated a lot of his time to continuously watching Destiny's debates, and every single time it's just like Destiny has denied IBM's existence in the Holocaust, like this sort of stuff, and it's just brutal. Let me talk about, because you asked before, Gordon, about the Canada Infrastructure Bank. So here's the thing. Technically, it is a government-owned bank, okay? But so is the Bank of Canada. So you start to ask, well, what's the point of having this infrastructure bank? So what the infrastructure bank does is that it allows wealthy billionaires, okay, to take their money, right, and invest it in government infrastructure, okay? So it's private sector merging with the public sector in public-private partnerships. That's what they call them. Public-private partnerships. The definition of fascism, as given by Mussolini, the founder of fascism, the quote is, "Fascism is better called corporatism because it is the merger of the public and private sectors," right? So what it means is that it means that instead of taxing the wealth away from the billionaire class, or the sociopath class if you prefer, Robin, instead of taxing that wealth away, right, and then using that wealth to build infrastructure like high-speed rail, solar panels, water pipes, like any of this kind of stuff, right? Instead of that, we borrow the money from the billionaire class, right, at interest. So if you imagine like you're borrowing the money, well, that means you need to pay that money back. So it means that if you taxed it and spread it out in the populace and your construction workers and engineers and stuff, they would use it and it would circulate, and eventually that money would find its way back up to the wealthy because that's how capitalism is structured. But but at least the populace would be able to use it for a bit of time, right? They would be able to circulate it for a little bit of time. Under this Canada Infrastructure Bank model, we borrow the money, right? And then because we pay it back, it doesn't get to circulate. And then we also have to pay them the interest, right? Do you think we're going to tax the billionaires for that? No, we're going to tax these guys. And so it's going to be a complete funneling of resources away from the populace up through the billionaire class, right? Until eventually these people have nothing and these people have everything. And so the system collapses. It's a fascist organization that was erected by the Trudeau Liberals that even the Globe and Mail calls, and the language they use is adorable. They say it's a boondoggle, right? That's what they call it. It's a boondoggle, and it'll be seen as a boondoggle. And like, nobody knows about it, nobody talks about it. I am very much of the opinion that the reason why we're constantly getting jammed the Bill C-10 stuff into our face is because the Jacobin did an incredibly powerful article about the Canada Infrastructure Bank, and the corporations needed to obfuscate. They needed to distract. They needed to be like, no, we can't have that. We can't have that. So let's talk about Bill C-10. Bill C-10 is coming to steal your rights and take everything from you, and everything's going to be a problem. Bill C-10 is the problem. Pay attention to Bill C-10. Bill C-10 is like the most tepid legislation ever. It literally takes existing legislation that exists already for film and television here in Canada and applies it to places like YouTube. That's it. That's all it does. And the people who are standing up being like, this takes your rights and it's a problem and all that kind of stuff, they're just throwing up a smoke screen so that we won't actually go, hey, have you noticed how this Canada Infrastructure Bank is actually going to destroy our economy? And it's designed to destroy our economy? I see you already know and disapprove of the politicians contracting to companies in debt to make jobs. Yeah, of course. Like, why are we... Hey, Vince, how you doing, bud? Thanks for popping in. Like, why are we kowtowing to billionaires? Like, why are we kowtowing to them at all? Like, the true power that exists in the democratic structure. The Prime Minister does not need to bow his head and nod along to the billionaire class. It's just, that's not how power works. But Trudeau is just, he just reads cue cards. That's it. He's a drama teacher, right? He reads cue cards. That's his whole job. And he reads cue cards on behalf of the billionaires. Yeah, thoughts on Ford's move today with the notwithstanding clause? My most recent video talks directly about this, bud. The opposition was loud, but it seems they don't have any power to do anything about it. Yeah, well, it pays to remember, Vince, that first of all, Doug Ford is a sociopathic nightmare fascist, right? Like he literally attempted to erect a police state. He's attacked the poor, the elderly, teachers, nurses. There isn't a single person in this province that he has not directly assaulted. And he's got 37% approval rating, which is disgusting to me. But what can you do about it? And and that's just it. What can you do about it? Because the system that we live in, right, the democratic structure that we have, was actually designed to do the inverse of what we're using it for, right? Like when we think about our democracy, we think, oh, the people get together and we elect a representative who then on our behalf does things to improve our society, right? That's how we think about it. The reality is that our structure was built so that we would elect a representative who would then go and say hello to the Queen, who actually had power, right? And that the Queen would say, this is what we're doing, and our representative would then turn around and do what the Queen told them to do, right? So fundamentally, and this is well understood, fundamentally, what they were electing is just the face that they wanted to say hello to when they heard what the Queen had to say. Hey, Paul? No, I don't remember you, bud, but I'm glad you're here. Thanks for popping in. Sorry, man, I have depression, and one of the big side effects of depression is memory loss. And so I actually, I have a really hard time remembering, like, names. I have a really hard time remembering, like, events and stuff like that. Like, I can forget, like, big events. When it comes to, like, knowledge, like political knowledge, for whatever reason, I'm pretty good. Like things like the Canada Infrastructure Bank, like politicians and stuff like this, I do really well. But for whatever reason, I do suffer, and it's gonna get worse because I'm gonna get older, right? So it's your number one friend from the Netherlands. Well, I'm honestly, dude, I'm just glad you're here. And super good that people are popping in. This live chat's getting pretty live. I like it. I would vote him again over Horwath or a Liberal Party candidate. I didn't vote, so Trudeau won for gas tax, but Doug was the only valid choice. Or risk anyone else, dude. I think Horwath is the choice this time around. Like if Doug Ford is a disaster for this province. I heard omega-3 helps with memory. Oh, that's a hot tip. I'll take a look at that, DJ. And omega-3 generally is just good for stuff. Okay, guys, I'm going to take a brief break because I drank a coffee. I'm just going to have a washroom break, and then we're going to start getting into the day's news. Chair stream, we're doing a chair stream now. My little doggy's hot. Oh, you're such a good boy, buddy. You're such a good boy. Gordon, you're just like retracting all your messages like over and over again, dude. Okay. This is actually a really big story that's going to completely go under the radar, right? Green MP Janica Atwin crossing the floor to join the Liberals. The reason why this is a big deal is that the Greens don't have that many people in the first place. Get out of here, you stupid system scan. They don't have that many MPs in the first place. But also... So she accomplished a historic breakthrough for the Greens in the last election, winning their first ever seat in Atlantic Canada. Okay, so she's like a pretty important MP in the Green Party kind of picture because she represents sort of the first breakthrough for the Greens. But and there's not that many Green MPs in the first place. And on top of that, the Greens themselves are experiencing an internal power structure that is still going on. Struggle, rather, that is still going on. Paul, I also deal with the depression. Currently, your 5-step plan. Go straight edge for a year. Oh, good luck. Work out. You're right about that, dude. Work out. Yeah, that to me is number one. Like, actually working out, going for regular walks, get outside, get some sun, do everything you can to get physical, right? Because like it's like depression is like occult energy that's like building up inside of you, and then if you like lift some weights or do some running, it like dissipates and comes into the world. For me, I have to play my guitar. I have to play my guitar every day, and if I don't actually sing or play my guitar every single day, the energy really builds up. Even if I do workouts, sometimes I like end a workout and I'm still just like, ugh. But it's when I pick up the guitar and actually sing. It's like expressing. You know, you ever see The Green Mile, and you stand up in the green and there's those scenes where the guy like sucks in people's energies, and then he like opens his mouth and like these bugs come out of his mouth or something, and it's just like, whoa. That's how I feel. That's how I feel, for sure. Find a new hobby, get a pet, get a girlfriend. Hey. Okay, so the Green MP, like, there's a huge power struggle going on in the Green Party right now. That right now, Annemie Paul, she's essentially a liberal, right? Like and the Greens are also really struggling with identity because their two major policy platforms, environmentalism as well as a guaranteed basic income, have been co-opted, basically. Like, there's plenty of movement going on in both the Liberal Party and the NDP on those issues. So the Greens are kind of sitting there being like, well, what do we stand for? Like, what are we even? And there's also a really massive power struggle between the kind of liberal side of the Green Party, which is manifested itself in Annemie Paul. But there's also a really strong socialist movement that exists in the Green Party that could take it over, right? Like, the Green Party could just become an outright socialist party. And if Annemie Paul doesn't actually win a seat, then she'll likely no longer be the leader of the Greens very, very soon. Why didn't she join the NDP? They're more pro-Palestine than the Liberals. Shows you the Green Party is between the Liberals and the NDP. They are truly centrist. I think this is an Atlantic Canada thing, okay? So, any reason to open the map. Any reason to open the map. I love maps. I love looking at the map. Any reason to open the map. Okay, so politics in Canada. The Liberal Party has strong support in Atlantic Canada. And it's really important to remember that, like, a big reason why the dynamics of politics exist as they do on the East Coast is because of the extremely entrenched corporate and conservative interests. New Brunswick, for example, is owned by the Irving family, and I'm not being hyperbolic about that. The New Brunswick, if you are working in New Brunswick, you are working for the Irvings, period. You cannot get a job that does not in some way connect to the Irving family. And of course the Irvings vote conservative, like they are and they want conservatism. And that goes in through Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, right, Newfoundland, all of that. And so because of the existence of this like hard-nosed far-right conservatism that exists on the East Coast, the existence of the Liberal Party as a counterfoil to that on the East Coast has always been fairly well entrenched, and the Liberals have done a fairly good job of maintaining their power here, while the NDP doesn't really have a big presence. And so the reason why she doesn't join the NDP is because the Liberals are the prevailing counterbalance, if you'd like And if you're a sitting MP, like, you're going to choose the winning team, I think. Hey, Ruth, how you doing? How you doing, bud? Or, bud, how you doing? Anyway, can you tell? Yes, running, biking, walking in a forest daily. I have this wonderful graveyard out here, and I don't live that far away from the beach. The biggest thing I'm struggling with these days is that because I'm like staring into the void, into the horror of all of this nonsense, and constantly talking to these idiots who are just like, just get a job and all this kind of stuff, I have a lot of trouble getting to sleep at night, and and of course, like, so I have medications and I have things, and a good friend of mine, she really helps me out with like teas and things like this, but like, so what that means is like I'll get to sleep at like 5 o'clock in the morning, and it means that I miss like the beautiful morning and a good portion of the day, because you know, and the sleep you get's not very good when this is happening. So my biggest struggle now is to get to bed at a reasonable hour and actually like try to get to sleep. Like, if I can get to sleep at like midnight or 1, I consider that to be like a real success. And I'm still kind of struggling with how to get there because my mental state is not very conducive to restfulness. Let's put it that way. Capitalism has lasted for 4,000 years in a desert. This will never collapse. We will just cause extinction and the forests are already gone. I actually disagree with you, bud. I think capitalism has already collapsed. That what we are experiencing now is not capitalism, right? Like, by any definition of what capitalism is and what the theory of capital actually is, we are currently living in Neofeudalism. That capitalism was erected in a feudal society, right? It came out of feudalism, and because it doesn't work, because capitalism as a system doesn't actually function, it has currently already collapsed. Like, who is Jeff Bezos but a king? Who is Bill Gates but a king, right? Like, these guys are kings in every way that you can possibly imagine a king working, in every way except title. Hello from the hot, humid hellhole. Hey, Onward. How you doing, bud? Oh, it's gotten bad again, hey? And I mean, one of the things that does help is going through, like, you see this poster back here, right? That's not just there because I'm like, because I think it's pretty, even though I do think it's pretty. It's also like a meditation, right? It's a chakra meditation. You start at the bottom and you actually read your way to the top, and it's a meditation, and I find that helps, but anyway. Oh, today's a very big depression talk day. And I guess that's good to talk about. Like, it's part of it. I tend to shy away from talking about it, but maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I should just dive right in, right? And we're back here. Rip capitalism. President Xi Jinping attends funeral for capitalism. I mean, like, yeah, capitalism doesn't really exist anymore, not in any meaningful way. Like, it is more accurate to call what we are experiencing neo-feudalism, right? Like, there are a handful of oligarchs who have power, and they're always going to have power. They're never going to like, a guy like Bill Gates is never not going to be a billionaire. It's impossible for him to not be rich, right? And the whole idea of capitalism is that you're making an investment, and then that investment yields dividends, right? But that's not what's happening anymore, right? The stock market is betting against, hedge funds are betting against the stock market. They're expecting it to collapse. People like Bill Gates are buying up huge swaths of land. The billionaires are buying all the land because they know that the stock market is going to collapse. And they know that when this stock market collapses again, it doesn't recover. not as if it recovered in the first place. Like the stock market as exists now is just a shambling zombie. Feudalism is different than capitalism. It is different. Like one of the big things about capitalism is that you can transfer the means of production, right? That the means of production are not owned by like a hereditary ruler, and that hereditary ruler just has it, and they have it by like the divine right of kings. But we've collapsed back into that. Yeah, exactly. Even if you paid 30% tax, he would still be a bajillionaire, right? And it just flows into what I've been saying about it's dangerous to have even one billionaire. If you have even one billionaire with, and I don't mean like a billionaire that has $100 billion, I mean a billionaire that has $1 billion, it's dangerous. It's dangerous because they can buy your political system, they can buy your media system, and just reconfigure the society to benefit them exclusively. And you can do that with even $1 billion. So it's just extremely dangerous. Like, I don't understand these conservative types who are like, you can't give money to poor people, they'll do something bad with it. Oh, but it's super great that there's a guy with $1 billion, he'll do everything good about it. Yeah, exactly. You're exactly on the nose with that, DM. That's exactly the analysis that I would walk away from. Is that she is interested in advancing her own career, and she's just joined the winning team on the East Coast. That the East Coast votes liberal. They have for decades, even though most of them, when I talk to them, are actually NDPers. Oh, the gold hoarding, eh, Paul? Yeah, that'll do it. That'll save us. No, this is the thing I don't think people understand. Like, the whole market's going to come down. And take a look at the GME thing, right? The GameStop thing, right? The only thing that actually gives value to things is people's opinions of those things, right? Like, if everybody in the world thought that this lighter was the most important thing to get a hold of, right? And that they had to have it and they needed to have it, then this would be the most valuable commodity on Earth, right? Just because everybody thinks it is. It doesn't matter if it's true or not, right? It just matters that people think that way. And there are commodities that actually do have intrinsic value. Things like land, things like water, things like food, right? Like, these do have intrinsic value to them, but that's not how our system works. That you take a look at the stock market, and it's just a graph of rich people feelings. And you steadily come to realize over time that rich people are sociopaths, and they have no imagination. And so their opinion of where they should put their money is actually incredibly stupid and based on absolutely nothing, because they're so short-sighted and so dumb that they can't even see something as simple as solar power is a good thing to invest in, right? That, like, China is doing everything it can, because they have a planned economy. They're building millions and millions of solar panels. They're building huge solar panel fields. They're doing everything they can to actually get off fossil fuels, and they're doing it with like a planned systemic move forward. And the capitalists are just sort of waking up, not even right now, but they're just going to like wake up one day and be like, oh shit, we've actually got to build some of these solar panels. So Western capitalism is always going, or Western Neofeudalism, because that's what it's actually turned into. They're always going to be behind the 8 ball, right? They're always going to be behind the 8 ball. Petrol has intrinsic value of hundreds of dollars per liter. The corruption is it's distributed cheap to fascists. Yeah, there's a bit of that. Oh yeah. Keiko Fujimori's lawyers have begun to appeal the process to try to annul 200,000 votes in areas of Peru which voted heavily in favor of Pedro Castillo. This is Peru. A social democrat defeated a fascist in Peru, here we go. which is actually a really, really big deal. And this is just the Trump playbook, right? This is just the Trump playbook that will say the election was stolen, will try to do a legal battle to have votes overturned and all this kind of stuff. And if she's successful, that would basically overturn the election in her favor. Yeah. My parents in their 30s. Let's buy a house. Me in my 30s. I guess I can't afford to have teeth. Yep. Welcome to Western capitalism. Welcome to Western capitalism. DPRK has way more sophisticated schools than anything I've ever attended. I mean, the propaganda that surrounds North Korea is astounding. It's absolutely astounding, the amount of propaganda that has come. Like, people's opinions of North Korea, that it's like this brutal dictatorship where, like, people are in horrible conditions and all this kind of stuff. Like, yeah, it's well cultivated. And I've talked to people who, like, I really respect, and I have high level opinions of, who are just like, no, North Korea is like an evil dictatorship. It's obviously trying to do harm to us. And I'm like, oh, okay. They're just trying to live their lives, man. They're just trying to make a go of it. I say learn bushcraft. Who needs money in supermarket? Well, and there is part of this. Like, I mean, when I walk around the city, I see lots of green space that I'm like, all of this could be converted into farmland. Like, who gives a shit about this capitalist structure? Hi, beer drinker. How you doing, bud? I would like to go to North Korea and China. I think it would be beautiful to visit. There's so much culture, so much history, and, like, North Korea, what it has done, like, the Korean War leveled North Korea, right? The Americans bombed the fuck out of North Korea. It was a total disaster after the Korean War. And the fact that they have, like, turned around and rebuilt, and they've created what they have after the high level of destruction that was wrought on them by Westerners, it's a fucking miracle. Like, it's a modern day miracle that they've managed to get to where they are now. And of course, what always happens? Westerners go over there. Like, there was that Vice documentary. They went over there and they were like, "Wow, it's so odd here." And I'm like, "Yeah, dude, you're looking at, like, a Reconstruction period where they literally had their entire civilization leveled by jet fighters bombing them ruthlessly and in a never-ending kind of way. It's a miracle that there's even people there." Like, I wouldn't tell people to learn bushcraft necessarily, but my generation will have to learn to live with and expect less. Yeah, we're definitely going to be living, like, I strongly suggest that everybody get a solar panel. Get a solar panel, like, start looking into solar energy, start investigating that in a more serious way, because moving forward, like, power is going to be the big thing, right? We are going to be struggling over power. United States, LOL in China, they pretend nothing happened at Tiananmen Square. United States history education. And the Indians taught the colonists how to grow corn. Yeah, that's exactly it. Zens won't be getting away with slander anymore? The Xinjiang Company lawsuits against Adrian Zen's are a forerunner of what's to come as part of China's new counter-sanctions bill, wherein countries gain a codified right to seek compensation and sue for damages. Oh, wow, this is actually huge. So if you guys don't know, Adrian Zen's is at the beating heart of the propaganda surrounding the Uyghur genocide narrative that exists in China. That he uses falsified documents and false information, and then goes to Western media sources like the BBC, like the Washington Post, who uncritically publish them. He'll also go to universities, and those universities will use his falsified documents to proclaim their own. Like, they'll be like, "Oh, there's definitely a genocide. This guy who's lying and has false documents said so." So, okay, whilst Zen's obviously has no assets in China and will never have to pay anything, the ruling will ultimately demand damages and come into legal force. This means the sanctions are not symbolic, and hypothetically any organization affiliated with him may become liable. Again, this is important in the bigger picture. Then his case, China will gain the capacity to sue in company in China that readily associates itself with anti-Chinese causes deemed responsible for losses, and this can be leveraged in turn to hit back against certain countries too. For example, if the H&M saga occurred in the post-Bill context, there's a possibility that it would not just be hit by a boycott, but subsequently be held accountable for sanctions-related damages. So essentially, they're basically going to say, if you're connected to Adrian Zen's, we're not going to do business with you, right? Very simple. If you're connected to Adrian Zen's in any way, we're just not going to do business with you. Which, yeah, that's accurate. Like, he's just a slandering evangelical sociopath who's carting like enormous lies and using false documents and false information, and accusing China of like sterilization programs for which there is no evidence, right? Like, it's absolutely astounding what this guy Adrian Zen's is doing. Like, if he actually had evidence, I would be singing a different tune. But he doesn't. He uses false documents and he lies his head off. So this is actually really big news. What do we have? You've got a better solution, Gordon. Well, why don't you share that with us? My son went to Asia, Thailand, Vietnam a couple of years ago to meet his wife's family. He adores it there. Yeah. I mean, and anytime I see videos of it, like, it's just such a beautiful country, right? There's so much history, there's so much fascinating stuff that has occurred in the region. Texas had that power outage and it's already been forgotten. Yeah, the problem is we're not allowed to learn anything from these crises. Biden is trying to move us from COVID without learning lessons, for sure. There's another shooting today in a Florida supermarket. It will be forgotten in 48 hours. Yeah. I think Biden is trying to figure out what the hell he's going to do first without the Republicans. Yeah. Well, no, like, what? He's not trying to figure out what the hell he's going to do first without the Republicans. He's trying to figure out how to make, what's the excuse for why he's not doing anything, right? Like, if the Democrats suddenly do get the House and the Senate and the presidency fully, right? Well, what excuse can they use then? What can they say? Well, we're not doing anything because why? Right? And they're not going to do anything. Like, the Democrats are completely bought and sold by corporate power. They're not interested in reforming the system. They're not interested in that at all. The system is working as intended as far as the Democrats are concerned. Oh yeah, that's fine. I actually find these sorts of gaffes and these sorts of situations to be endearing. Like, I look at them and I'm kind of like, yeah, okay, so they're a person, right? It's like, my favorite one is George W. Bush's, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, and I ain't gonna get fooled again. Right? People made a lot of hay of that, but I actually found it to be quite endearing, because I was just like, we're all people, we forget things, we have gaffes, it's totally fine. Thanks for popping in, Heidelman. Good to see you, man. Good to see you. I'm glad things are going well for you. Biden is praying the Dems will lose the Senate, so he has someone to blame. I think that's absolutely true, bud. I think that's absolutely true. They are prioritizing on advocating sexuality to children? Okay, that's interesting. I think I want to see some sources on that. I think there are enough people to vote for Dems over Republicans, even though they know it's all crap. Well, I do think that the electorate in the United States, like, there's kind of a put up or shut up kind of moment happening, I think, in the States. I do think that the Republican Party, the Republican Party's insanity is, like, the Democrats have their own version of QAnon, right? Which I call Blue Anon, which I didn't invent. I've heard that. But the Blue Anon, like, they have Russiagate. Like, Russiagate's nuts. Like, it's just insane. Like, the blaming Russia narrative that exists in the Democratic Party, that's some QAnon level conspiracy shit. But the QAnon folks and the, like, insanity of Donald Trump and the insanity of the evangelical movement within the Republican Party, people are starting to move away from it. people are starting to move away from it and starting to realize that, oh, we definitely have to at least give the Democrats a moment to like put up or shut up, right? Put them in the position where they have to come up with some kind of excuse for why they're not actually moving forward on any of this stuff. That make it so that they cannot blame the Republicans. Because technically right now with the Senate being configured how it is, they can kind of blame the Republicans, even though they have like, I'd say 4 or 5 Democrats, which are Republicans, for sure. Yeah, the crazy MAGA shit is just too much, even for Republicans. It's too much. It's too much. It like at least the Russiagate narrative is sort of entrenched in American history, right? Like that, oh, blaming Russia and this sort of McCarthyism and all this kind of stuff. Like there's a logic to it. You can sort of see how there is. I can kind of put together how that is, but like QAnon is nuts. Like they're just off their meds. It's weird when Trudeau is to the right of Biden with the Keystone XL pipeline. Alberta lost $1.3 billion. Alberta NDP are poised to win in 2023. Ontario NDP, yeah. Saskatchewan NDP, where are you? Yeah. If Andrea Horwath can't beat Doug Ford in this next election, she should resign. Like it's very, very obvious that she needs to resign if she can't beat like an open sociopath who's alienated literally everybody. And people are just starting to realize like Justin Trudeau is a right winger, right? Like we pretend as though he's got like this, like people call him a socialist and a communist, and I'm like, what the fuck are you even talking about? Like Justin Trudeau is farther to the right than Stephen Harper, right? Stephen Harper is closer to a centrist, is more left wing, even though he's still right wing, obviously. But like he's to the left of Justin Trudeau, right? Like Stephen Harper passed the childcare benefit, right? Stephen Harper didn't buy a whole bunch of pipelines. Stephen Harper didn't like erect the Canadian Infrastructure Bank. Like Justin Trudeau is much farther to the left than Stephen Harper ever was. But he has like a coiffed of hair, and he speaks so calmly. So people like totally just eat it up, right? But if Stephen Harper tried to do even half the stuff that Justin Trudeau has done, people will call him a fascist. People would be screaming their heads off about it. But you know, because Trudeau has charisma, and Stephen Harper doesn't. That's all people really care about, because fundamentally, and I worry I get myself into trouble on this, but and that I lose support from subscribers by saying this, but the truth is, Canadians are extremely gullible. We're just extremely gullible. We can really believe any narrative as long as it like makes us feel good about ourselves, right? As long as it inflates our egos, as long as it's like a pat on the back. Good old Canada, right? As long as it goes for this good old Canada narrative, we'll believe anything. We'll buy anything. We're very, 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 very gullible, as seen in like the Trudeau Liberals. Like anybody who's trying to walk around saying that Trudeau is even a socialist, forget about that. Like about a communist. Oh my God, I can't imagine how gullible you'd have to be to actually believe that. Oh, that's a beautiful shot. Oh, that's just a nice shot. I should have been putting this on the whole time. Biden was the USA taking a long vacation. The reality show president was fine, but conspiracy theories January 6th and saying he'll be back is too much. Yeah, and January 6th, the fact that it's not being dealt with, this is one thing. I do think that there is like a strong right-wing movement in the United States who are like, no, you do not just get to ignore that. You do not just get to pretend like we cannot investigate that. You do not get to have an insurrection and invade the Capitol Hill and then legislatively prevent its investigation. You do not get to do that. And I actually think that the Republicans standing in the way of that investigation and blockading it is actually going to be their death knell. And I am more than a little convinced that in the midterm elections, there's going to be lots of people who go to that ballot box exclusively for this reason. And they'll be voting exclusively to have the investigation in January 6th. Because you got to remember, like, if you're a heavily propagandized people who believe in the sanctity of your democracy, right? Because you've been heavily propagandized to believe that that's the case. Well, when an insurrection happens and then is subsequently ignored, you're going to be a good patriot, and you're going to be like, fuck that. That's no, I don't accept that. And so I actually do expect to see a swing towards the Democrats in the midterms, specifically for this issue. And once the Democrats do nothing about that, then it'll just be all hell break loose. It was funny, after Trudeau, I like that, Trudeau, that's funny, had a blackface scandal, someone said, wow, he really wanted to be Obama more than I thought. My favorite thing to say about that blackface scandal is that, yeah, Trudeau came out wearing blackface, and so we gave him exactly what he wanted, a minority. Or also, I love saying, so Trudeau, he loves wearing costumes, right? So he wears the Aladdin costume, and I love the idea that he like looks in the mirror and goes, you know, there's something missing. I love it. I wish I could do more, but you can't inform a closed mind. That's absolutely true, man. It's just like these people who are walking around telling me, like, you just need to go get a job. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, go get a job. Like, there are people living in tent cities, many of whom have jobs. Like, what the fuck are you even talking about? Do you know how high the rent is? You know how low the wages are? Like, oh, well, just go get a better job. Yeah, because there's just, like, jobs on job trees. I'll just go to the job fair and go get a job. Like, it's just unfucking believable. This is a beautiful shot, by the way. Is this coming out of our Canada? Yeah. Absolutely beautiful shot. Really, really love it. I'm actually going to save this one. I really like this one. I'm going to save this one. This guy is becoming like a celebrity who...
settle for Biden-Harris so they can... Remember the entire general election when left-wingers were told we need to settle for Biden-Harris so they can improve the border? Well, it turns out fixing the border meant going to Guatemala and telling people to stop coming to the U.S.
Do not come.
Ah, yeah, that should do it. As if people are fleeing their countries en masse just because they feel like it. Like Kamala, if y'all want to reduce the number of refugees, why did you launch missiles at the country with the most refugees? You're going to Latin America to tell them to stop coming to the U.S. while holding Venezuela under 160 sanctions. This is the reason they're coming to the U.S. Because the U.S. is starving them. And then when they get here, we throw them in cages. And then we're sending our leaders to Latin America to lecture them against risking everything to bring their family to a better condition. And that is liberalism. We won't end the imperialism. We won't end the border camps. We'll just act really professional and put a smiling face on the murderous empire.
Nails it. Nails it. If you're a TikToker, right? If you're a TikTok person, this kid right here. Find this kid. Every video I've seen with this kid is just like super hot fire. I'm super jealous of him because he's like handsome and hunky, and he does what I do, but he's doing it better than me. Jelly. Super jelly. There were so many liberal scandals in 2018-19, and he still won more seats. Conservatives NDP, very weak opposition. There needs to be a Labour Party in Canada. I do think... Here's something that I think is actually important to know about. So, the last election, it pays to remember that the NDP had just put in a new leader. New leadership always does poorly in the first election. It's very, very rare that a new leader comes in and immediately pops up and seizes the power. Justin Trudeau is sort of an exception to that, but he has his father's last name, right? So, and the power structure of the Liberal Party was still in place for the most part. Jagmeet Singh, not only was he a new leader, he came in by kind of bringing lots of new people in and taking the party over, right? And of course, the thing that really holds Jagmeet Singh back in the first election is his turban. Like, when I see any conversation or any polling data or anything, people didn't really mind that he was a minority, and in fact, lots of people were like, maybe it's time for a minority, right? Like, just like catch that Obama energy, right? People didn't really mind. Yeah, he's a Sikh. Okay, that's great. What's with the turban? That's the number one comment. People are like, what is with the turban? And you can find videos of people approaching Jagmeet Singh in that election and being like, bro, like, this turban is a problem. Like, it's going to hold you back. And Justin, and of course, he's like, well, then we need to learn to communicate about that. And but now we're in the second election with Jagmeet Singh, and Jagmeet Singh's favorability. This is the thing that I think is really interesting. Jagmeet Singh's favorability is higher than anybody else's. O'Toole's favorability, people really don't like him. He's at like a negative 12, which means like you take his people who say positive things about him, and then people who say negative things about them, and then you balance them out, and what do you get? You get negative 12. So more people think badly about him than think well about him. Justin Trudeau is sitting at like +2. Jagmeet Singh is sitting at like +10, right? So people really, really think positively of him. And then on top of that, NDP is the Labour Party in Canada, right? The unions historically swing NDP, right? And there are big movements happening in Labour parties and Labour unions who are very aware that we need to be swinging to the left. We need to be moving to the left. And so the NDP have a real opportunity, I think. And also, like, Quebec, remember Quebec went NDP, right? Quebec had a huge election. When Jack Layton's last election, they swung NDP really, really hard. And so you do have, like, the Bloc Québécois has noticed that. And and so that has made the Bloc Québécois swing to the left as well. Like, you don't have a moment like that in your political discourse where everybody suddenly votes NDP and the whole province turns orange and it just disappears. Like, that doesn't happen. Like, that was a huge moment in Canadian politics, and it could happen again. Hoping this is wrong and he wins more, but I'm not sure. I also find Obama way more charismatic than Jagmeet or Trudeau. Then again, that's neoliberalism but the fact that they are polling in the same position as they were... it's also important to remember, like, Canadians do not pay attention to politics outside of election season. That's just a truism at this point, right? And you can see, like, the polls as they stand, like, they really only waffle, like, a little bit up and down, all that kind of stuff. When the election begins, things can swing wildly. Things can swing wildly in the 4-week period up to an election, because Canadians do not pay attention to politics, right? They don't pay attention to politics until about 4 weeks out from the election, about 6 weeks out from the election. And then the... you already like curling, that's hilarious. And they've shown repeatedly that they are fickle and completely willing to change their mind. They're completely willing, especially like between liberal. No, it's true across the board, right? There are conservatives who will switch over to liberal. There are liberals who will switch over to NDP. Like, people are not married to their political parties. About 15% of the supporters of each party are hard. Like, they will hard support conservative, they will hard support liberal, they will hard support NDP. Anything above that is completely malleable and completely moves around. We've seen it over and over and over again here in Canada, where people will vote conservative one time but then turn around and vote liberal. People who vote liberal will turn around, vote NDP, turn around, vote liberal again, right? Like, that you can change people's minds. And that all happens in the election period. And it is because Canadians, we don't have time for this shit. We don't have time for this shit. Like, if you're a madman like me and you spend all your time paying attention to this shit, right? Like, you can talk about like the intricate kind of stuff, but the truth is that most Canadians can be swayed with stupid slogans and cheap beer, right? That's Doug Ford, right? Doug Ford had catchy slogans, offered what? Cheaper hydro rates and cheap beer. That was his whole platform. Sure, you can be the premier of Ontario, bud. I could have buck a beer, right? And so, like, when you have a group of people who are as fickle as we are, as gullible as we are, and in lots of cases as stupid as we are, it means that your election season is crazy. You can have crazy shit happen in an election season, right? And so the current polling data is useful because it kind of shows you a general opinion of voter intention, but Canadians are very fickle, and they can have their mind changed, and debates matter in Canada, right? I feel like the debates matter less in the United States, but the debates really matter in Canada. Like people change their mind in the debates for sure, and there are lots of people who just like all they do is watch the debate. They're just like, okay, there's an election, I don't know anything about any of these guys, or if I do know something, it's like very sort of impression based. It's not fact based. It's just based on the impressions I have. And then you see them in the debates, and there are people who literally are like, you know, I just like the cut of that guy's jib. I just like how he's talking. And now with Jagmeet, the turban and is actually becoming one of his strengths, because people are so hungry for genuine people, right? People are so hungry for just like, oh, here's a guy who's genuine, right? That to me explains Jordan Peterson completely, because Jordan Peterson is like a far-right fascist, but he's genuine, right? He's a genuine person who is genuinely telling you what he thinks passionately and with purpose and intent. And people are like, wow, that guy's really genuine. And so they go along with it. And so you take a look at someone like Jagmeet Singh, and there's lots of people who you wouldn't expect to go for a minority guy wearing a turban, who are like, he has conviction, right? Of course, maybe I don't understand why he needs to wear this turban. Maybe I don't understand that, but I respect his conviction and his commitment to whatever that is he's doing, right? And so it which is exactly like how a white person, like a white Canadian, is going to act on this. It's like, well, I don't get it, but he seems to get it, and you know what? That's good enough for me, right? And I think it's going to end up being one of his strengths, is his commitment to his own faith and his own, and it shows like a moral center, which I think people really are hungry for. And so when the election comes, I do think that Jagmeet Singh is going to make gains, and that the Liberals and the Conservatives are underestimating the NDP. And you can see that in the last election. Like, the NDP were sort of just like floating down here, and then the debates happened, and they went right up, right? They went right up. And I think if Jagmeet Singh comes out strong on issues like a basic income, if he comes out strong about dealing with the housing crisis, if he comes out strong against the billionaire class, yeah, he could win a lot of support. Yeah, neolibs underestimate people's innate ability to smell a phony. Yeah. Why play dumb as if it's a power play when we lose as a social communist group, that huge voter group? I don't quite understand what you mean, Gordon. Sorry. You lost a comment to screening. Yeah, that'd do it. Yeah, I don't like that. I just wish they'd send them all through. I don't know how to change that. Somebody told me to change it into a live chat, but it's still screening stuff. I don't know how to change it. It really sucks. How long is this? 2 minutes? We can spend 2 minutes looking at Fidel Castro. Oh, and Hugo Chavez. Brilliant. And what makes something like this really beautiful is that, like, Hugo Chavez and Fidel Castro built these clinics, right?
Bueno, una sorpresa súper agradable. Cuando subieron ayer que iba a pasar por aquí y iba a visitar a los enfermos. Y me he emocionado mucho, mucho, mucho viendo a los pacientes, viendo a las madres con los niños, y alentadas. Yo mismo me he quedado sorprendido de la rapidez con que muchos...
Cuba is a beautiful country, man. I've only been there the one time, and of course I was there as a tourist.
Cuando uno tiene estos contactos, descubre la cantidad de sufrimiento y dolor ahí ignorado, ¿verdad? Y qué nivel de felicidad siente la gente cuando tiene una esperanza. Es increíble, yo salgo impresionado.
Sorry, Garden. Are you upset? You're like downvoting stuff? Something you want to talk about, bud? What? Gordon Bud, what is happening? Why forfeit the entire Christian vote when the pervert vote is worthless? Hey, do not underestimate the power of perverts. Oh, interesting. Iran is building 2 nuclear power plants in cooperation with Russia. That just entrenches the relationship between Iran and Russia further. Which, like, that's the axis of evil, right? Iran, Russia, and China. Why be coy and deny... Oh, I see what you're saying, Gordon. Why be coy and deny the sexualizing children agenda? I'm not trying to be coy. Like, let's be straight. Like, we all understand that the Epstein situation exists. We understand that there is, like, a pedophile that is entrenched at, like, the highest level of government. We, like Bill Clinton was on those flights. Donald Trump was on those flights. There's no sense denying that there is definitely a relationship between power in the United States and, like, a pedophile sex ring. Like, that 100% exists. It's extremely odd that we're not investigating it. It's extremely odd that it's not, like, constantly being talked about, right? I don't remember the context of my first comment. But, like, here, what was it? Let's back it up. Were we talking about Trudeau? Because I think that's what it is. Like, or were we talking about Biden? Anyway. Yeah, there's definitely, like, a pedophile sex ring connection with Jeffrey Epstein. There's definitely, like, and I would love to see more, I definitely would love to see more investigation in that regard. I don't think they're legislating anything that makes that. Yeah, that scandal implicates both parties. Well, not even both parties, but, like, lots of people in the corporate power structure, right? That, like, you've got, I believe Bill Gates was on those flights. Steven Pinker was on those flights. Like, and the fact that we, like, have a list, like, we know all about that. Yeah, like, it's there's this incredible story that exists there, and nobody is talking about it. There's just, like, no conversation about it whatsoever. And it's one of those things where I've said before on this chat in regards to this Jeffrey Epstein scandal, for sure there's going to be, like, someone's going to come out with a big, thick tome when I turn, like, 60, and the tome is going to go through all this stuff. And all the people, like Bill Gates and Bill Clinton and Trump and all these guys, they'll be dead, right? So they'll be long gone by this point, and this tome will come out that tells this incredible story of how the power elite in America worked with this pedophile Jeffrey Epstein in order to essentially have, like, a pedophile sex island that they could all go and visit, Like, Bill Clinton visited that place 20 times at least, right? Like, that's not a small amount, right? Like, that's not a small amount. And people are gonna read this tome, and they're just gonna be like, what in the fuck was happening during this period of time? Like, what in the absolute fuck? Like, this is supervillain level stuff that we're talking about, right? Like, this is super villainy. And again, why it's dangerous to allow billionaires in your society. Because if a billionaire just wants to have a pedophile sex island, he's gonna have a pedophile sex island. He's just gonna have it. And I mean, it makes total sense that such an institution would be erected during the neoliberal period, right? Yeah, I mentioned I was reading a book on Operation Chaos, and it's good. All of this is getting exposed, but it's too late. It worked. Yeah, it can be exposed now. Well, and also on top of that, like, exposing that kind of stuff, like, retroactively, means that, okay, so you're reading the history and you're looking at all that kind of stuff. So if you're talking about stuff that's already happened, it means you're not talking about stuff that's currently happening, right? And sure, you can use that information to sort of inform what's happening today, and you probably should do that, but, like, it's part of the CIA strategy of obfuscation and confusion, right? To, like the CIA would love it. The CIA would love it if everybody kept talking about the JFK assassination, right? Like, the CIA is completely fine with that. Yeah, keep talking about the JFK assassination, right? Keep trying to work that out. You know, that event that happened, like, what, fucking 60 years ago now? Yeah, keep talking about that. It means that you're not going to talk about our coups and our invasions that are current and ongoing, right? Anyway, good news. So I'm sorry if I offended you, Gordon. I didn't mean to. I hope that smoothed things out. I am always trying to find a way through. Why do you think that Westerners can't understand that the many ethnicities that live in China are Chinese? They talk like China is a hand state who oppresses Uyghurs and all these. Yeah. Just transferring our problems onto China, right? Like that, well, we treat our minority groups like crap, so clearly the Chinese must also treat their minority groups like crap. Johnson & Johnson will pay $2.1 billion for putting asbestos in its baby powder, causing breast cancer in women. Sounds like a big fine, but just in the last decade it made $142 billion in profit. J&J has known about the asbestos since 1971. Capitalism doesn't work, man. It just doesn't work. It just, like, the reason, why are they putting asbestos in baby powder? Because it allows them to cut the formula, right? It's a cheap way to not make the formula pure, right? That's classic drug use, right? Like you want to sell a bunch of Coke, well, put some flour in there, right? Like cut it with something that like that'll dilute it and make it give you more to sell, right? Buckle up or be robbed by peace officers. If you resist the robbery, you will be caged. If you resist the caging, you will be murdered. I mean, this is obviously a Photoshop, but, like, yeah, that's essentially how it does go. Prosecutor requests prison for Peru presidential candidate Fujimori. Oh, wow. The lead prosecutor in an ongoing Peruvian corruption case urged a judge Thursday to send presidential candidate Keiko Fujimori back to preventative prison in connection with an ongoing corruption case, even as votes continue to be tallied. Well, and also it pays to know about this woman, who is the loser in this election in Peru, that her father was the ruler of Peru and actually got jailed. He's in prison now for like 25 years for like a multitude of corruption scandals. So like, and she obviously knew about these things. She's obviously intertwined with all of this. So, remembering the Canadian D-Day landing 77 years later. America. Burger King and Popeyes having a chicken sandwich war while being owned by the same parent company is the greatest real-life analogy for our modern American political parties. Yep, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. I'm going to save this one. I'm starting to, like, save good memes that I see so that I can start doing, like, meme dumps. Because I think that, like, giving people a collage, like, Daddy, what was it like in 2021? Here's what it was like. Show them, like, this collage. Make, like, a little book of all the memes, right? Seems like we have a competition. Hillary Clinton is a pro-Hillary Clinton forum to support Hillary Clinton. Alright, whatever. This is turning into... This has hit my feet a couple of times now. Building 2 nuclear power plants in cooperation with Russia. Yeah, great. Great. You gotta do what you gotta do, man. You gotta do what you gotta do. I used to be, like, really anti-nuclear because, you know, safety issues, and also there is a waste issue as well. But, like, as I've gotten older, I am getting to be like, okay, you know, like, we gotta do what we gotta do here. Like, fossil fuels are a problem. Like, somebody wants to build a nuclear power plant. Like, you gotta do what you gotta do. Like, let's go. I am, of course, a big proponent of solar ultimately, but, you know, you gotta do what you gotta do. Jeff Bezos, when 9 million people die of hunger each year, yeah, he doesn't give a fuck at all. There's this new meme going around that he's going to launch himself into space, and everybody's like, I hope he doesn't come back. Hope he doesn't come back. This is not a political statement, but I like the HBO Chernobyl series. Yeah, and, like, Chernobyl is an interesting one, right? Because, like, it really is like the Soviets wanted that event to occur. Like, anytime I take a look at Chernobyl, I'm just kind of like, did you guys want this reactor to go? Like, is that... Because it really does look like they did everything they could to make that reactor actually go, right? And I do think that... of course, I'm always skeptical of American sources doing any kind of reporting on communist places, because they'll always manipulate the narrative to make the Soviets look as bad as possible. But I do think that HBO did a reasonable enough job on Chernobyl. I haven't actually seen it, but everything I've seen about it and everybody I've talked to about it, even people on the left, communists and such, are like, yeah, they do a pretty good job. And, like, I just think that there is something to be said about, like, technological growing pains. Like, we don't actually know everything. And so bad shit's going to happen while we mess with, like, solar, or mess with nuclear power. And it's pretty telling that, like, an event like that has not occurred again, you know? So they can pay $15 an hour to their workers and still pay their CEO $38 million a year. Chipotle has decided to raise their prices by 36 cents per burrito. Recognize what this means. We've spent over 2 decades as a nation with almost half of all Americans needing food stamps just to survive to save 36 cents per burrito. 36 cents. This country is freaking ridiculous with its right-wing stupidity. All this nonsense for years, and the effect was 36 cents. And their CEO is still making $38 million per year. Yep. Saving it. Imagine the terror that will ripple through Western society when he starts lifting. When Kim Jong-un loses weight, the experts discuss the geopolitical consequences. I see this coming around. There's Kim Jong-un, the leader, has lost a little bit of weight. It's not even a bunch of weight. It's just like a little bit of weight. And people are, like, losing their... Like, this is in the Washington Post. Like, capitalism is doing everything it can to not discuss its billionaire class. Which is why it's losing credibility. Which is why... Western news sources are losing ratings. It's why nobody's paying any attention anymore to the corporate media, because it's not actually talking about the only issue people care about, which is, hey, have you noticed that your society has been taken over by billionaires? Hey, have you noticed that there's a bunch of billionaires that have taken over your society? No, the media that the billionaires own is never going to talk about that. They're never going to discuss it. Reasons why conservatives hate socialism. Consequences of capitalism. Helping everyone means also helping minorities. People underestimate the costs that go into a product. The transportation of the food, the price of gas to cook. The final service worker is a small part of the price. Yeah, exactly. Well, and also, like, there isn't actually that many workers, right? Like, part of the crisis that we're having today is that we've automated huge sections of this process. That, like, it used to require 90% of the populace to get food from the field to your face, right? It used to require 90% of the populace. Now it requires 2%, right? It requires such a small amount of people in the first place that to increase the wages of the people who are actually doing the work in that process is not going to have like a large effect on the wider, like, if you raise the price of a good by 5 cents, the end result of that is millions and millions and millions of dollars, right? Whereas if you raise the wage of the workers by $5 even, something like that, because there's so few workers actually doing that work, it just doesn't have that big a consequence on the overall nature of what's happening in that system. This whole grift of like, oh, our business, it won't be able to, like, shut up and go out of business. It's not real. And the biggest problem that we're facing in our labor markets these days is that so much of the system has been automated. Like, we literally could have a 3-day work week and it would be completely fine. It would be completely fine. Like, just let people live their lives, work way less, and because we've automated huge sections of our system, it would completely work. But we're ruled by sociopaths who, the misery is part of the point. They want you to be exhausted. They don't want you to have leisure time because they know if you have leisure time that you will use part of that leisure time to organize against them, right? Like, and they know that that's the truth. So they'll never let you do it. They need you to be exhausted. They need you to be working all the time. They need you to be constantly in despair, and this isn't just me like talking out my ass. You can go see Alan Greenspan, the head of the Federal Reserve in the United States, talking about this to Congress openly, that the strategy of the capitalist class is to create a workforce that is on the precipice of their own destruction, that desperate workers are good workers in a capitalist system. Like, they're very open about it. Libertarianism is like an invisible moth gnawing away at the people's political integrity. That's a great quote. Because libertarianism ultimately is just like, it is fascism. Like, it's just unfettered capital. Like, if you believe in libertarianism, you are saying that you want corporations to take the place over, right? And that corporations should rule. And we know that each corporation is its own little petty kingdom and fiefdom, ruled by a sociopath. Like, why would we ever agree to that? Financial independence, retire early. Hey, FIRE, why do you always wear that mask? Passive income, landlordism. Let's keep this on. Yep. Landlords are worthless. They are parasites. They should be removed from the system completely. Israelis' occupation cannot even stand to see a Palestinian smile. After the widespread of pictures showing Jerusalemites smiling while being arrested in defiance of the occupation, Israeli occupation soldiers deliberately covered the face of Palestinians while arresting them. Wild. Imagine being so fragile that if somebody smiled, like, you've got to do something about that. Like, that's how fragile these people are. And that's really something, actually. Like, they are fragile. Like, this whole thing, like, it's all, yeah, joy-free zone, exactly. It's all, like, it's being perpetrated but like literally all it would take is just like the end of the United States supporting it, and that would be it. It would just fall apart instantly. It would happen like incredibly quickly. It would be horrible. It would be like a horrific purging for sure, but like it would be very quick. And the yeah, I lost my train of thought on that one. Oh well. Yep, definitely lost my train of thought on that. Oh well. Oh yes, that's what I wanted to say. Right. Like when they began bombing in the Gaza Strip, like Biden was like, he wanted that to end. Like he was like, do not, what are you doing? Like you're just drawing attention to this. All you're doing is like drawing attention to this. And a big reason why Netanyahu's no longer the president is because of this. Because his gambit was to do this damage in the Gaza Strip to deflect from the fact that he was being indicted. And then finally, I am of the opinion that probably Biden as well as the American generals demanded that Netanyahu step down or go to prison because like the outcry was like, it's bad enough that this situation exists in the first place, but when you start like actively bombing places and doing like open war crimes, yeah, people are going to talk back to you. And the narrative is shifting in the United States and Canada. People don't buy this both sides narrative anymore. Barbara Einreich's book, Dancing in the Streets, A History of Collective Joy, is interesting on the topic of spontaneous joy, going back to medieval times. Interesting. That's what an unusual reference. I love it. Yeah, it has to be stamped out, absolutely. Absolutely. Like, have you noticed how miserable everybody is right now? There's an intent behind that. Like, people want... capitalists want us to be miserable and get used to our misery. Because if our lives are miserable and our workplaces are nice, then we will want to sell ourselves to these workplaces, right? That if our society is a shithole and everything is horrible, but you go to like a Starbucks and it's actually kind of nice there, then you're going to want to go to Starbucks more often. I have not heard of nickel and dimed. Do you ever think we'll see an NDP majority federally in our lifetime at all? Or will there be another conservative majority? Okay. So Vince, this is what I'm going to go do. I'm going to go use the washroom again because I drank too much coffee. I'm an idiot. And then we're going to have a big conversation about that because that is a great question. One moment. Chair stream, everybody look at my chair. Chair stream, hey there. Yeah, okay. I do support collective action and external influences within political parties, but when fascism creeps and they start rolling the tanks on the street, there's little we can do. We need the left to win big, otherwise it'll come down to someone worse than Trump, both in the US and Canada. The left must win big. You're absolutely, Vince. So here's what is happening, and all this is the best information that we have access to. And when it comes to politics, The best information that we have access to are polls, right? People really like say, oh, polling data, this, that, and the other thing. It is an accurate representation of people's moods. It is an accurate representation of people's intentions in that moment. It's not predictive, though. That's the thing that people get caught in, right? They look at polls and they think, oh, well, so people are thinking this, so this should happen in a year or in 6 months or something. That's not how polls work. In fact, it's the opposite of how polls work. If anything, polls are telling you what people were thinking earlier, right? That we asked a bunch of people a week ago what they thought, and this is what they were thinking a week ago. So they're not predictive. They're more, I don't know what word to use here. They're not predictive, they're blur. But whatever blur is, that's what they are. And so the Conservative Party is fracturing, right? It is fracturing, and it is losing support in Canada. You can just take a look at what's happening in Alberta generally to understand that that's happening. There is an enormous amount of dissatisfaction in the Conservative Party with their own leader. Aaron O'Toole is not coming across well across Canada. He is not looking good. He is doing, I think, everything he can, but he has made a couple of really big gaffes that his political opponents are going to make hay of. For example, his statement that the residential school systems were initially set up to educate, that they were supposed to be educational facilities. Like, it's so laughably, provably wrong and embarrassing to say out loud. And then on top of that, like, people, like, boomers are dying, right? So the older generation is dying. So the Conservative Party are losing voters over time, and they're not gaining any extra voters, right? They're not gaining anybody. And then on top of that, as the Conservatives are trying to move themselves to the center, they're not being successful because their own party is voting against things like, hey, climate change is real, right? Like, literally, like, just saying climate change is not real means that you can't be elected in Canada. You can't. It's like the number one reason why Trudeau keeps getting voted in is because he's saying climate change is real and the Conservatives are not. And that's not an insignificant distinction, right? And so you can see that the Conservatives are starting to fracture because of the existence of the People's Party of Canada, the PPC, right? That there is a party that is starting to erect itself because the Conservatives are not fascist enough. And the Conservatives are not fascist enough, right? Like, they recently got rid of Derek Sloan for being a fascist, and Derek Sloan will probably end up in the PPC. And so the Conservative Party is beginning to unravel. And I do think that Aaron O'Toole is probably the last genuine gasp. Like, I don't know who could come in to credibly lead this group. Like, maybe Peter MacKay. Like, maybe Peter MacKay could come in. But the unholy alliance of hardcore far-right evangelical Christians, racists and bigots, and business is unraveling, right? It's starting to come apart. And so you can see that that's happening on the right. And the existence of the PPC is sort of case in point for this. That and this gives lie to sort of the political theory that says eventually in a democracy all things funnel into two parties, right? That eventually two parties come together and are erected, and those two become the two options. But I don't think that that's true, right? I think that democracies are, like, the party structures are indicative of the views of the populace. And if or at least the views of the populace, as well as the power structures that exist within the society, right? So, like, the United States has a two-party system, but that's on purpose. Like, they've purposefully done that on purpose because They want to create the appearance of a democracy, right? That the United States isn't a democracy. It just has the appearance of a democracy. Would Pierre Poilievre or Rona Ambrose go for leadership after? I hope they don't, because after 4 years of Trudeau, they'll run on anti-Trudeau. And honestly, actually, now that you mentioned Pierre Poilievre, I can never pronounce this guy's last name. He is a dangerous, he's dangerous. He is actually very dangerous, because he does have a degree of charisma. He's a good speaker. When he speaks, he uses facts and evidence and ties it in to what people's lived experiences are. And then right at the end of what he's going to say, he twists it and takes it in the neoliberal direction, right? So he really gets you on his side, and you're really like nodding along and being like, this guy seems reasonable. And then right at the end, he just twists it over into neoliberalism. And he's very good at it. He's very good at it. And so he's actually dangerous. Yeah, O'Toole is, but here's the biggest problem. Even somebody like Pierre Poilievre, the biggest problem that the Conservatives have are the Conservatives themselves. That they are not actually having a leadership problem. That the problems that they are facing are much deeper and are cultural, right? That Canadians do not want to vote for a party that is denying the existence of climate change. Canadians do not want to vote for a party that is denying the existence of systemic racism. They just are not interested in doing that. And that's the reason why O'Toole is coming across as unfavorable. Because the reality is that the Conservative Party itself and its membership itself is unelectable. And so the one thing that might save us from somebody like Pierre is the fact that the people in the Conservative Party are themselves unelectable, right? I don't think, like, because I actually think Aaron O'Toole's a much better leader than Andrew Scheer. He comes across much stronger than Andrew Scheer, and you can see how O'Toole is trying desperately to pull his party to the center. He said outright during the convention that the climate change conversation is over, right? Like, the debate is over. Climate change is real. He was saying that kind of stuff outright, and then the party voted against him, right? And so Aaron O'Toole is doing everything he can to pull the party to the center, and as will Pierre Poilievre, as will any Conservative leader, because you can rule from the right, but you can't be elected from the right in Canada, right? You can't be a hard right fascist and get elected. You just can't. You have to at least campaign on the left. You have to at least, and that's what the Liberals do. The Liberals campaign on the left, right? And so the Conservative Party is actually fracturing, very much the same way that the Liberal Party fractured underneath Paul Martin and then Ignatieff, right? That after Chrétien, and Chrétien was viewed by many as like a stalwart leader. He was like the Biden of Pierre Trudeau Sr., right? Of Pierre Elliott Trudeau Sr.'s reign. If you think about it that way, that's actually accurate. That, like, we had a long-reigning, long-standing politician by the name of Pierre Elliott Trudeau who did, who as a leader was a mixed bag, but who, like, did put through important legislation. He's the reason we have the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. The Liberal Party is the party that put through the Universal Health Care Bill. People rather liked Pierre Elliott Trudeau as a person, I think. And so Chrétien, who was kind of one of in his inner circle, once Pierre Elliott Trudeau retires and then subsequently dies, Chrétien is the one who kind of seizes the reins and carries through the energy of that reign, just like Biden is doing from the Obama years. And Chrétien himself also, like, again, another mixed bag, but one of the things that he definitely did was kept us out of the Iraq War, right? Like, he just said no to that, which tells me he's a good man, but, you know, good men can be bought. And so after Chrétien, we got Paul Martin, and immediately it was obvious that Paul Martin was a conservative. Like, he ruled as a conservative, he was a conservative, everything he did was conservative. He didn't give a fuck about the poor, he didn't care about anybody. He was a neoliberal, big money. That's what he cared about. And then they declined into a minority, right? And then the Liberals put forward Ignatieff. Oh, they had Dion in there at one point too, who was just like so soft, like nobody cared about Dion. And then Ignatieff, who like has American citizenship, which is a death knell in Canadian politics. If you have American citizenship, you cannot rule a party. Like that was a thing that really hurt Andrew Scheer, and so Ignatieff destroyed the Liberal Party. That like the Liberals collapsed, lots of people swung over to the left, but lots of people also swung over to the right, and that collapse of the Liberal Party is what gave Stephen Harper his majority, right? That Stephen Harper was only in minority territory and had ruled as a minority leader, and then once the Liberals collapsed, that's what gave him the moment to be able to come and seize majority power. And then he only got majority power once, and then immediately everybody swings over to Trudeau. Because, oh, here's a pretty boy with his father's name. Oh, we remember Pierre Elliott Trudeau. We like Pierre Elliott Trudeau, right? And then it turns out that Justin Trudeau is much farther to the right than even Stephen Harper was. Certainly much farther to the right than his own father, and will likely be voted out of power having done nothing of consequence, which is an embarrassment to his family's legacy. And so, okay, hold on. What was the initial question that got me started on this? Because I was driving towards a point. You had said an NDP majority. That's right. So if the Liberals are doing their job, right? If the Liberals are doing their job, there should never be an NDP majority, right? It should never, ever, ever happen. That the day that the NDP get a majority in this country is the day that the Liberal Party ceases to exist, right, in fundamental ways. Because the Liberals know this, right, that the role of Liberals in a capitalist society and in Western capitalism is to act as a release valve for the anger of the population. That as the populace begins to become disgruntled and angry at the capitalist system, that creates that anger, that creates rage in the populace, that the Liberals come in and they galvanize that anger underneath a singular issue, right? So something like healthcare, something like voting rights, right? Something like electoral reform, right? And then after they galvanize that anger into a single issue, they throw small crumbs at it, right? And this acts as a release valve for the populace, so that the populace doesn't... Because the fear of the capitalists is that the populace will just overwhelm the system. Did I say populace? Anyway, that the people will just overwhelm the system and get rid of the capitalists. That's the threat, right? And so the Liberals need to throw crumbs at the populace and act as that release valve, or else the populace will abandon the Liberals, as we did underneath Ignatieff, right, in the post-Chrétien years, and we will allow the Conservatives to rule. Because if the Liberals are just going to act like Conservatives, let's just get the Conservatives in. And here in Canada, that actually ended up being not a big deal. Like, Stephen Harper, while he was a neoliberal, right, he was further to the left than Justin Trudeau was, right? So what's this like horror show? What kind of horror show am I expecting out of the Conservatives? I don't know. Take a look at Stephen Harper, right? He was a better leader than Trudeau. We got more out of Harper than we're getting out of Trudeau, and so if the NDP were to suddenly seize power and secure a majority, it would 100% be because the Liberals have ceased to be Liberals, which in many ways they have ceased to be Liberals. Like, the Liberals right now are a right-wing party. I don't see them as anything other than like a right-wing, and further to the right than the Stephen Harper Conservatives were, right? And so is it possible? Of course it's possible. Mulcair could have done it. Mulcair could have done it, right? That in the election, after Stephen Harper's majority, remember, you had Stephen Harper had his majority. It was Justin Trudeau, Thomas Mulcair, the Bloc, and the Greens, right? And the polling data leading into that election showed that the populace had Trudeau and Mulcair at like a dead even. The populace went into the election just thinking it's one of these two. We just got to work out which way we're going to go, right? And in my view, what happened is that Trudeau came out, and he came out hard. He looked scrappy. He looked youthful. He was running on the left, right? He was running on the left. He ran to the left of Mulcair, right? And he looked vigorous. He was saying all the the gender stuff, waving the pride flag kind of stuff, half his cabinet women, like that kind of stuff. So he looked really, really good, and moreover, he looked energetic and he looked like scrappy, and people really, really liked that because it went into the whole narrative of fighting against this corporate oligarch power structure that Justin Trudeau ultimately is completely complicit in and completely a part of. And so while Justin Trudeau was doing that, Mulcair essentially gives the election away because he comes out and looks like Raffi, right? He just comes out and he's like smiling like an oaf, looking like a dummy, doesn't really say anything meaningful, doesn't actually galvanize the anger of the populace. That's why the NDP consistently fail, is because they refuse to acknowledge that people are fucking angry. People are mad. And instead of attempting to galvanize that anger and get the populace on board to a revolutionary project on an idea that we're going to take this place over, he comes out smiling like a moron, trying to appeal to, I don't even know who he was trying to appeal to. Like, was he trying to appeal to like old white women who were going to vote conservative anyway? Why? Like, why? And like Thomas Mulcair, when he's in the House, you can see him speaking from his heart, and you could see him like really pounding on the issue, and you could see the moral anger that he had. And then when it came time to run a campaign, he took that moral anger, put it aside, and came out like, "Oh, hi, I'm Tom Mulcair. I will be your leader." He looked like a fucking clown. And the populace made him pay for it. We all just went, okay, well, Justin Trudeau looks energetic, scrappy, he's saying all the right stuff, and he's running to the left of this Raffi-looking moron. And he's got his father's name, and we liked Pierre Elliott Trudeau generally, so we swung in that direction. And that was Mulcair's opportunity. And how do we know it was Mulcair's opportunity? Because the election previously, Quebec went orange, right? So there's your majority right there. They had it. Mulcair just came out looking like a dumb fucking idiot. And so is it possible that that energy will be galvanized once again? Is it possible that the populace will become so... yeah, exactly. Jack Layton in the Orange Wave of 2011 was as close as we got to an NDP majority. But the thing is that everybody knew it. And part of the thing that was so important about the Orange Wave during that period of time is that it completely dismantled the narrative. For one election, it completely dismantled the narrative that, I gotta vote Liberal because I don't want the Conservative to go in, right? If I vote NDP, then the Conservative might overwhelm the Liberal, and then we'll end up with a Conservative, right? Like, that narrative persists and is very deeply entrenched in the consciousness of the populace. And it, of course, is used by both the Conservatives and the Liberals to maintain their alliance, because they are allied with one another. Like, don't fool yourself. The Conservatives and the Liberals work together. They understand that they are allies, right? They understand that. And so the energy going into the next election was very much on this line of like, okay, we can all vote NDP. We can do it. It can happen. It's a shame that Jack Layton died, but the NDP could also use that energy of like, remember Jack, we all loved Jack. Let's use this positive energy of Jack Layton and the Orange Wave and all of this, and we can get into a majority. And then Mulcair comes out going, "Hi everybody, I'm Tom Mulcair. I could be your leader." Fucking idiot. Like a fucking idiot. Fire these idiots. Which is what we did. Which is exactly what we did. Like, if you're gonna make such a boneheaded, stupid decision to come out looking like a fucking clown, the way that Tom Mulcair looked like, while Justin Trudeau is campaigning to the left of you, looking young, hot, and voracious, you deserve to lose, and he did. Right? It was one of the worst campaigns maybe in the history of the nation. And like an embarrassment to everyone involved. And so, but that energy can be recaptured, right? But the NDP needs to rebuild its energy, and it needs to and after the collapse, because the NDP collapsed after that, right? They ran this disastrous campaign that and got punished for it badly, right? They took all of this public goodwill and all of this positive energy, and they just dumped it into a clown who fucked everybody. And then because like, what an insult! I'm sorry, man. It's a fucking huge insult. Like, I'm sitting here swimming in student debt, gonna be homeless. I'm working for these oligarchic fascists who are trying to destroy me, and you're coming out looking like a fucking clown? How dare you insult me like that? Yeah, I'm gonna vote Justin Trudeau. At least I'm gonna get legal weed out of that fucking idiot. Right? and so, Jagmeet Singh's game is different. And it has to be different, because he's a different type of person. And the party is different, right? The party got taken over by Jagmeet Singh, and the Sikh community and the Muslim community is now more entrenched in the NDP than they were before. They still have inroads with the unions. They still have inroads to labor. But because Tom Mulcair ran such a fucking disastrous campaign, much of that union support has waffled towards the Liberals. But that's starting to erode as well, right? So, and as Jagmeet Singh shows that he is a good leader, and that he is an appropriate leader to exist within the NDP, and as Canadians begin to settle in to the reality of who Jagmeet Singh is as a person, and as people begin to get over their initial shock, because that's what it was. It was just a bunch of white people being like, "What? The NDP did what? What? What happened to Jack Layton with the mustache and like the all this? And what happened to Tom Mulcair with the beard? And I was so used to these white people, and now there's this brown guy with a big beard and a turban, right?" But as people settle in, and as people like look at Jagmeet Singh, and as they listen to him, and as he, like, Jagmeet Singh is like largely gaffe free, right? Like that's a big deal in politics. Hey, Dan Boxes, how you doing, bud? Exactly. Jagmeet Singh seems like a real human to me, right? I have many complaints about his leadership skills and how he speaks rhetorically. I feel like he's a good person. That means something. Do you think Mulcair was put in as controlled opposition? No. No. I think that the NDP just genuinely misread the room. I think it's really that simple. I think that they sort of hoped that they could walk into the room and just sort of galvanize that energy that Jack Layton had. And I think that their general strategy was like, just don't scare people off, right? I think that was their big strategy. That I think they thought that this was like just kind of a layup, you know, that they were in majority territory, that the orange wave was there. People were really disgruntled. And who is this Justin Trudeau kid anyway, right? Like that kind of energy. And so I just think it was old men who didn't realize that they were in over their head, right? That they did need to galvanize the energy of the populace. They did need to slam dunk this. They did need to actually run a campaign to the left of Justin Trudeau. They did need to do these kinds of things. And really, I mean, like, are we surprised? Like, oh, leftists who choke right at the end of it. I mean, that's... And I agree with you, Dan Boxes. I think I do think that he has, like, when he talks, he kind of sounds like a surfer dude. You ever notice this? Like, this is something I've really noticed about Jagmeet Singh. Like, he looks great. Some of the pictures that are taken of Jagmeet Singh, even when he's just sort of standing around, he looks great. He looks statesmanly. He looks, there's a regality that surrounds him. He just looks good. But then he starts talking, and he sounds kind of like a surfer dude, right? Like, he sounds just kind of like, yeah, hey guys, you know, I think that the wage gap here in Canada is not so good, bruh. Like, he sounds like that. And he kind of presents himself like that way. And I don't think that's off-putting, though. There is kind of a charm about that. But, like, Justin Trudeau has honed the ability to sound intelligent and to sound compassionate and empathetic. It's part of his skill set as an actor and as a dramatist, is his ability to appear intelligent, appear compassionate, and sound like he gives a fuck, right? Like, that's Justin Trudeau's skill set. And so compared to that, Jagmeet Singh does not sound as refined. And that's really what it is that it's just, and it makes sense that Justin Trudeau sounds refined. He's like the child of a former prime minister with some of the best education that you can get. And he's part of this like prestigious elite. Of course he sounds refined, because he is refined. Whereas Jagmeet Singh is, you know, lowbrow. Would that be a fair thing to say? Like, I'm not trying to be insulting to him, but like, you know, he's not part of this Canadian elite, you know? He's just sort of a dude, you know? And so when he talks, he just kind of sounds like a dude. Even though I think he does take really good tactics. Like, one of the really strong tactics that Jagmeet Singh uses is when people ask him of, like, oh, you want to build water pipelines to First Nations people, how are we going to pay for that, right? And his response to that is, if Toronto was having a water crisis, would you be asking that question? Because it is a fundamentally racist question, right? It's only being asked because it is a racist issue. And when it comes to these sorts of race issues, and when it comes to the multiculturalism that exists throughout Canada, and I think it's because of who Jagmeet Singh is and the community that he's tied to, he sounds and looks very strong. And I think he could be very, very influential on those sorts of points. And as we move forward, and as this capitalist system continues to fail, and public trust erodes in the Liberal Party further, as it becomes more obvious that they are a far-right party, somebody like Jagmeet Singh, I think, is going to do pretty well by the NDP, I think. I do kind of lament that he didn't attempt to just take over the Ontario legislature. I wish he had have used his power to take over the Ontario legislature and not the. I wish that Andrew Horwath had have resigned and Jagmeet Singh had have attempted to become the Premier of Ontario, because I think he would have been successful at that. This road that he's on to become the Prime Minister, there's a path. I think he can do it. I think as we move forward, people will take that idea more seriously, because as they get used to him and as they get used to who he is, it's a longer road than somebody like Justin Trudeau, who was born with a silver spoon in his daddy's name. But that's politics for you, baby. Like, if you take a look at Stephen Harper's trajectory, right? Stephen Harper didn't just become the Prime Minister, right? It was a long road. He had to reform the Conservative Party. Remember, it broke up. There were like the Conservatives and the Reform Party, right? He had to amalgamate these two groups back together and find a way to get them to work, and then fight against the Chrétien liberals and the Paul Martin liberals, and become a minority government first, right? Stephen Harper became a minority government first, and then finally attained the majority. And that's the path of Canadian politics, right? We very rarely will just like snap over, right? Justin Trudeau is an exception, but he's not an exception in larger power, in a Machiavellian sense, right? Justin Trudeau is just a continuation of his father's legacy, right? But when non-liberal power structures start to erect, their trajectory is very much like this, and then the decline is very much like that. And I expect to see a very similar thing happen with the NDP if they kind of don't do what Thomas Mulcair did, which is shoot himself right in the fucking foot. If you can't tell, I'm extremely mad at Thomas Mulcair. Okay, you guys have said a lot of stuff. I think anyone would have been difficult after Jack Layton. That's definitely true. Tom Mulcair was a good choice, though. Tom Mulcair was a really good choice. Dan Boxes. I want him to speak with his chest on several policy issues too, and I think this speaks to his, like, with the exception of race and gender issues, which I think he's more like, that's more built into who he is. He doesn't really have strong opinions on policy issues, right? Because when he talks about policy issues, he is just talking about the policy issues that his own base have put on him. So like a basic income is exactly an issue that I think he could be speaking with more veracity on. He could be a champion of. But I feel like the only reason he's talking about that issue is because his own people are telling him to. And I think that's true of a lot of the policy issues that he's focused on. Ultimately, I think he just needs to hire an acting coach, right? I just think he needs to hire an acting coach. And if he hired an acting coach, I think that acting coach would really, really help him out. Would really, really help him out. And you're right, Ruth. Anyone would have been difficult after Jack Layton. Thomas Mulcair was a good choice, but they needed to fire their campaign managers because their choices were very, very bad. Like, if Tom Mulcair had to come out and been the Tom Mulcair we've seen in the House, I think he would have won that election. The thing is, NDP lost seats in 2019, and that's because of the vote Liberal to stop Conservative votes. You're worried it might happen again this year? I don't think it will. I expect the NDP to at least maintain their position. I won't be too surprised if they start to gain seats, because there's a lot of dissatisfaction, and the support that the Liberals have is soft. And again, like, Jagmeet Singh, first time election, what's with the turban, who is this guy? Now we're kind of used to him, I think. Like, I've even spoken to, like, Just Get a Job crowd, right? I've spoken to, like, the conservative types who are never going to vote for him, right? And they're quite comfortable with him too, right? That, like, even the far right Just Get a Job types are just like, oh yeah, that's just who he is, right? Can't hold that against him, right? And I think that's what's going to carry the day with Jagmeet Singh. Yeah, he does sound like a university undergrad. He does. He has that kind of, and it's an unrefined quality, right? Which is why he needs to hire an acting coach, right? Like, he could be much more impressive than he actually is because he looks impressive, and to many Canadians he looks imposing, right? Because of who he is, and then once he starts talking, he just kind of has like a friendly. Like, I don't want to say doofus, like, that's not right, like, it's not accurate, but it is kind of just like, hey, brah, you want to come down and, like, hang out, brah? Let's play some video games. Hey, me and AOC, we're gonna play Among Us. Come on, brah. People saw Jack Layton as they saw Trudeau Sr. He sat with everyone, talked to strangers, walked to everyone, said hi to everyone. I mean, that's just good politicking, good optics. Yeah, important to do, for sure. Do you think Trudeau will be replaced by Freeland after this year so they can get the hashtag girlboss, hashtag slay queen narrative in mainstream media? And would that help them? I think that they are not done with Trudeau yet. That Trudeau is still serving his purpose, right? That, like, you got to remember, the corporatists have won. They have what they want. That they don't need to do anything, right? They own the halls of power. They own the society. They've structurally won. At this stage in the game, it's literally just squeezing the blood from the stone, right? And you elect, a sociopath like Doug Ford, and he is going to squeeze that blood out of that stone. But your observation that Freeland is the follow-up, Freeland is for sure the follow-up. That they've got Freeland ready to go. And actually, I think Freeland is much more intelligent. She understands a lot of what's going on. Way more than Trudeau. Trudeau reads cue cards. That's all he does. Trudeau's strength is that he presents well, right? But he as like an actual legislator, no, he's not a smart person. Whereas Freeland is a smart person. There's a reason why she's like the deputy prime minister and like the minister of this and the minister of that and does this and does that. It's because she knows what she's fucking doing, right? Whereas Trudeau, I mean, he just kind of shows up, they give him the cue cards, he reads them, and he goes home, right? Like, that's his job. There is a charm to it for sure. However, there are certain issues where he comes off like he just finished writing a mediocre paper on, let's say, social housing. Yeah, exactly. No, I think you're right. Like, I think you're right. Like, and I think that's just because, like, of that kind of unrefined sort of thing that we've been talking about. Nikki Ashton should run if Freeland does. I like Nikki Ashton. She's from Manitoba, my home province. I think that Nikki Ashton would be a disaster for the NDP. Unfortunately. I just think that she is strong. She is willful. She is an excellent legislator. She is excellent as the leader of the opposition. And I think that your classic liberal Karen would immediately be turned off by her. Like, immediately. That it would just be straight up, like, I am not going to vote for Nikki Ashton. And it's unfortunate, because I think that someone like Nikki Ashton absolutely deserves to take a run like that. And absolutely deserves respect, and absolutely deserves that. But the Karens of the world are not going to give someone like Nikki Ashton respect. And that's just the hard truth of it. Jag needs to articulate cold, hard policy. Personality time is over. I think you're right, Ward. But I think that he is well aware that his time is the debate. That it's the debate. He needs to come out hard on the debates. And I think that I think he knows it, the NDP know it, the Liberals know it, the Conservatives know it, everybody knows it. That right now he does just need to, like, not alienate people and get people used to who he is. And then when the debate comes, and when it comes down to the brass tacks, he is going to have... and I can see him already sharpening his talking points with the media. that he's using the media as his prep for the debates, and he knows that the debate is his time. Yeah, I think you're right. Bold. He needs to be bold. You're absolutely right. A lot of people say that people speculated Horwath would have resigned and been running mayor of Hamilton with Jagmeet running the NDP, but here we are. Well, and I also do think that Horwath's strategy is more long-term, right? That, like, and I rag on Horwath all the time. I really go after her, but she really wants to. People will look back and think of Horwath as a builder of the NDP, that she is like the Moses of the Ontario NDP, right? That her goal is to get everybody to the promised land, but that she herself will never see it, right? That Moses brings people to the promised land, but ultimately it's Joshua that leads people into the promised land. I keep a sharp eye out on the other Singh in the House of in the legislature. I forget her first name offhand, but there's another Singh, right? A female. Wish I could remember her name offhand, but when she stands up in the legislature, she looks good. She looks good, and I think that Horwath, her strength is that she was able to get, like, she would have an election and suddenly they would get like a bunch of seats, like over in they would get a bunch of seats in Sudbury, seats that they'd never gotten before, right? And you can see Andrea Horwath celebrating. We got those seats. We did it. We never have gotten these seats before, but now we've got them. But while they were pursuing those seats, they lost a couple of seats in Toronto. So they kind of evened out. And then they have a next election, right? And then suddenly they win some seats in Windsor, right? But they also lose one seat in Sudbury and then another seat in Toronto, right? So it kind of evens out. And so now we're going into this election, and Andrea Horwath's goal and objective should be, I'm going to get these seats in Toronto back, which can be done, and then we're going to get those seats in Sudbury back. We're going to keep those seats in Windsor, and then all at once, all of the gains that I have made through my whole career are going to flourish and manifest simultaneously, and I'll become the Premier of Ontario. That's her game. And it can work. It can work. But it's going to require all of the seats that she won and then lost, and sort of the ups and downs and all this. It's going to require a big swell all at once. And the truth is that that's going to require a kind of rallying cry, right? An impassioned speech maker who is going to rally the troops and really get people incensed and angry at not only their lot, but at the Conservatives, and have people swing over and just be like, yeah! And I don't think she ultimately has it. To put it in Survivor terms, because I watch the show Survivor, I really love it. She's had a beautiful game, but I don't think she can win it at Final Tribal. I just don't think she wins at Final Tribal. I think that somebody else is going to pick it off at Final Tribal. Which is a shame, because I think that she's worked really hard to build a coalition that could win. But buck a beer. Where are we here? Both of them failed to gain any seats next election. If both of them fail to gain any seats next election, I think they both have to resign and have a socialist to replace them. I mean, if Andrea Horwath cannot beat a first-time running Liberal who doesn't even have a seat, Stephen Del Duca, right, and a rapacious sociopath that has made life harder for literally everybody while embarrassing the whole province, she needs to resign. I think the writing is on the wall, right? That, thank you for your service, Andrea, but we need some new blood in this conversation. We need somebody who's going to be willing to galvanize the anger of the populace, grab a hold of Doug Ford's balls, and squeeze them until he squeals like a little girl. And like, you can see like Stephen Del, go take a look at his Twitter feed. Stephen Del Duca's Twitter feed is Twitter is absolutely case in point what I am talking about. Okay, I'm not going to do this. Like, Andrea Horvath will say, and what Doug Ford has done is unacceptable, right? And then Stephen Del Duca will be like, look at this fucking idiot. How'd this guy become the leader of the country, or of the province? Fuck this guy. Let's get him out of here. Which one do you think the Bucket Beer crowd's going to go for? This is unacceptable. Fuck this guy. Embarrassment. Worst premier ever. Which one do you think? Which one do you think? Did you see Jenica Atwin cross... Yep, Wigwith. We were just talking about that earlier. What do you think this does to the Greens and their future? It's a huge loss for them. Because that was a major, major win for them to get a Green Party leader, a Green Party MP elected in the East Coast. It was a big deal. And they don't have a lot of seats in the first place, right? They're not a big party. And it really, really does go to show you how fractured and weak the party actually is without Elizabeth May. Like, you actually should expect this kind of thing when you have a transition leader, right? You should expect there being some fraying at the edges. But what it really shows, ultimately to me, is a inability of Annamie Paul to maintain order in her own party, which is split. Like, the party is split between neoliberals like Annamie Paul, she's a neoliberal without a doubt, and the socialists who are trying to take that party over, and in my view probably will. And the truth of what's going on, Annamie Paul doesn't have a seat, right? She's trying to take over. Why am I forgetting that name? The former Minister of Finance under Trudeau, Morneau. She's trying to take over Morneau's old seat, right? Here in Toronto, because the Greens would love to have a seat in Toronto, and so they're going to run her in Toronto. They'll probably not win, and if she doesn't win a seat, I think that they have a leadership convention, and then I think the Socialists take the party over. I think that's the trajectory that the Green Party is on, and I also think it's the trajectory of just the demographics of Canada. The Boomers are dying. The Gen Z are revolutionary, right? They're looking to upset the balance, and they're going to do it in the Green Party. And so the loss of this MP on the East Coast kind of speaks to that narrative, in my view. Yeah, you see a guitar in the background. I play the guitar wonderfully, and I sing songs wonderfully. Thank you. Onward to dystopia. Out of all the choices, Singh is the clear choice federally. Unfortunately, it's not so clear to so many. I get you. Yeah, absolutely, Matt. First of all, thanks for coming. Thanks for being here, Matt. And yeah, politics is to many people very amorphous. Like, I think to people who actually study it, yeah, like Singh is a clear choice. But to people who kind of tune in only during election season, it's not so clear. That's why it's important for people like us to actually like get our game face on and do our research, so that when the election starts and people start actually going like, who are these people? What do they stand for? What's going on? We'll be ready. Statesmanship is kind of bullshit, brah. There's something to that too, Ward. Like, I don't necessarily want a statesman. I want somebody who's going to pass legislation, right? Jagmeet's brother is in Brampton, yeah. Dan Boxes, question for John and chat. Any recommendations for good documentaries from a left perspective, excluding the awesome stuff that has been watched on this stream? Well, thank you so much, Dan Boxes. That's so nice. Let me percolate on that one, bud. Nothing's jumping to my mind immediately. And like, on what subject? Is there a subject that you're looking for? Sarah Singh. Sarah Singh. I'm not saying that she would. I'm just saying that anytime I've seen her, she looks very impressive. And that there are voices in the NDP who I think could take the party over and continue Andrea's work, right? Like, unlike Jagmeet Singh, who kind of had a reset. There was almost like a party reset that happened with Jagmeet Singh, where it just became a new party and with a new goal and a new thing. Like, Jagmeet Singh's election was not a continuation of Jack Layton, right? It was not a continuation. It was a new thing and a new chapter. Whereas I think that the person who follows Andrew Horvath up can continue on the trajectory and can be like, I've worked with Andrew Horvath. We're into this, and Andrew Horvath may very well stay in the party, right? Like, she might not retire. She'll just step down as leader, and then act as kind of like another, just to continue all that energy forward. I trust Trudeau and I trust Singh. I don't trust who they answer to within their parties. You should not trust Trudeau. Trudeau is an empty vessel. He doesn't actually have opinions. I don't think we can move on to a better tomorrow with this partisanship, politically driven system. Yeah, I do hear what you're saying there, Matt. It would be nice if we could create a system that was more responsive to the desires of the populace. I mean, the very fact that there are tent cities in Toronto tells you that our political system doesn't work very well. Like, that's a major, massive crisis. There are people living in tents in parks. That's a major priority one issue. And the fact that it cannot be resolved and it is not being resolved tells you that our political system isn't that good. Doesn't really work. I think Sarah and Joel Harden, I really like Joel Harden, right? Imagine if she called him a fascist on the debate stage. That would be amazing. I also think it would be career ending. Like, I do. Even if it was accurate, I do think it would be career ending, because the Buckabeer crowd and the liberals would be outraged and then scoff at it and then be like, oh, she's not a serious politician, right? Oh, she just says that everything she doesn't like is fascist. That's what they would say, and that would carry the day, right? One of the hardest lessons I had to learn as a political analyst is that the people of this country are pretty shitty, right? That, like, I would, like, analyze politics assuming that the people of the country are actually good and attempting to help each other, and then the outcome of the election and the outcome of what was happening didn't align with this idea that people are actually trying to help one another, and so then I had to kind of find a reason for, okay, well, why is this happening? How is it that the people who are obviously there to help people don't get power, and the people who are obviously there to grift and hurt everybody do get power? Like, why is that actually happening? And the only conclusion that I could come to was that the majority of Canadians are bad people. Like, sorry to say it. I shouldn't say bad people, but just, like, gullible and easily duped, extraordinarily selfish, for sure extraordinarily selfish, and that all of the, like, narratives of, like, oh, Canada's a welcoming, polite nation is, like, that's just a grift that we're running on ourselves, right? Like when someone like Rex Murphy stands up and says, like, oh, Canada, we're so welcoming, just ignore the fact that we're selling bombs, right? Just ignore the fact that we're an arms dealer, right? Ignore that. Don't pay any attention to that. We're so welcoming, right? It's a self-grift. We're so gullible that we're willing to lie to ourselves. And once I started to understand that, our politics started to make a lot more sense to me. I started to be like, oh yeah, okay, so buck a beer. That's how you get elected. You just buck a beer for the people, you know. That's all it takes. Also, the ONDP postponing their convention from this November to next February and using it as a campaign launch is a little worrying. Where's the debate for policies? Yeah, Socialist Action has been talking about that. And there's definitely a consolidation of power happening within the NDP, which I think is natural. It's natural for political parties to go through that, because, like, ultimately political parties are quite fragile, right? That they are a series of internal alliances between large voting blocs, right? And that's something that is not actually discussed widely because our political, our owners, the billionaires, don't really want us to understand how the political system works, right? But every single party is a collection. It's not a collection of individuals, right? The way that like Peterson will grift you with. It's a collection of collections, right? It's organizations like Socialist Action, like multiple unions, the universities, right? Teachers union, police union, fire union, and so it's an amalgamation of those larger bodies that need to be organized with, negotiated with internally. Concessions need to be made internally, and then ultimately it manifests itself in this presentation of debate, of the debates, right? Which is very like pageant based and very like theatrical, right? There's a theater to the debates, but behind all of that is this enormous process. And of course the NDP wants to coalesce power underneath the current leadership. That's what happens every single time. Justin Trudeau wants to make power concrete. Stephen Harper does. Like everybody does. Like that's not surprising. I do think that the pandemic has sort of opened the door to kind of just like shoving the debate away. Like, oh, we don't need to talk about this. Just shuffle it away. And I agree with you, Vince. I do think that is kind of worrying. Onward. I recently grew my nails back out and have been playing my nylon classic guitar again. It's a great way to unplug and relax. You're absolutely right about that. I think more people should play an instrument, but it's too often turned into a competition or people don't see the point. Well, and if you can't make money doing it, right? That you can't just do something that is art for art's sake. You can't just do something to improve the quality of your soul, or to improve the quality of the life around you and improve the mood of the people around you, or just to do something for the sake of doing it. No, if you can't sell it, if you can't make money doing it, then it's not worth anything in this society of money worship, which is a goddamn shame. Which is a goddamn shame. Have we already discussed Jenica Atwin floor crossing the Liberals? Hey, Demand Better, how you doing? Yes, we have. Huge loss for the Greens, yep. But Zatzman literally said he wanted to get rid of her, so the Zionist Greens pushed her out. Yeah, it's what's happening in the Green Party is weird. Like I just don't know what else to call it. It's just weird. There's a strong socialist movement, but there's also a strong Zionist group, and there's also strong neoliberal tendencies. It's just weird. It's a weird alliance of a lot of weird forces that ultimately I think the only reason exists is because they are not represented by the other official parties. I don't know if I said hi to you, Dan. Hi, Dan. How you doing? Oh, I know, buddy. You want go get it. Go get it. I'm not saying go get it to you guys. I'm saying go get it to my little pug. Oh my God, he's like running around. Go get it. Oh, what a sweetheart. What a sweetheart. I need to get like a camera that I can actually move and show you guys. What a good boy, buddy. Where's your toy? Where's your toy? Okay. Anecdotal, my parents are immigrants and they won't ever see Canada as bad compared to their upbringing in Eastern Europe in the 60s and 90s. Yeah. Regarding people picking up instruments, capitalism wants to commodify all your hobbies. Absolutely. And Dan, what you're describing there is actually a big strategy in the Liberal Party. It's one of the ways that the Liberals have always maintained their power is because the Conservatives are anti-immigration and are pretty open about it, or they want to make immigration harder. The Liberals have always kind of had an open borders idea and really let immigrants in. And really help them get settled and really help them. And if you're doing that for those people, they're going to vote for you, right? They're going to go liberal. And it's very, very common to hear that oh, the liberals helped me and all this, and I don't really understand the political dynamics because I'm just moving to this country, and this place is so much better than the place that we sold weapons to destroy, right? But they don't understand that that's happening, right? That we sold the weapons to bomb them so that they would have to immigrate out of the shithole that we created for them, right? That's not how they see it. So, with MPs like Susie Morrison and Joel, I have a feeling Andrea won't do anything fishy. No, she's not. And Andrea is well respected in her party, for good reason. Also, why do people take Steve Paikin seriously? Dude's a conservative. I mean, Steve Paikin at this point is something of an institution, and I don't think that Steve Paikin is, like, how to say this properly. While Steve Paikin himself may be a conservative, which we don't know, he could be a liberal, he does a pretty good job creating a show that has a traditional centrist perspective. That Steve Paikin in the agenda is actually a really, like, he's reasonable. I think that's what people really like about him. That he brings in, like, he'll have Evelyn Forget on his show, right? He'll bring in, like, NDP supporters and left-wing people, right? Because he knows this is part of Canadian politics. Here they are, right? He is certainly guilty of doing what I'm calling panel stacking, which is that you'll have a far-right fascist, a liberal who's a right-winger, basically, and then maybe some centrist there, who's usually the expert, right? Like the doctor or the climate change guy, right? A PhD scholar, right? Who's usually a centrist, because these types of people view centrism as like a goal to attain instead of us who, we see a revolutionary project before us. Anyway, and so he'll have like the far right fascist, the liberal right winger, and the centrist expert, and they'll have a discussion, and then anything to the left of that is completely excluded, right? That he will not have a socialist on. He will not have a communist on. Certainly not a communist. And then these three panelists, along with Steve Paikin, will have like a lively debate amongst themselves. And so it gives the appearance that, like, oh yeah, we're really digging into this and we're really having a good conversation about it, and we're really, really like exploring this. But because they've excluded anything to the left of the centrist, you're not really getting a larger picture. And that's something that I think Steve Paikin you can peg Steve Paikin with, but that's not unique to him. That's a very, very like Western imperialist thing to do. It's have big lively debates among the fascists. Like, it's very common. So and at the end of the day, I think Steve Paikin, people really like him because he's reasonable. He does invite leftists on. He does communicate with people to the left of center. And I don't think he is active in a pursuit of silencing leftist voices. And so because he presents reasonably and because there is a reasonableness about him, he's well respected. And to a degree, I understand that, and I think it's not incorrect. Like, I have sourced and used Steve Paikin's stuff before, and and even though his show is called The Agenda, I don't think he himself has an agenda. I think his agenda is to just be a newsman and to try and capture the spirit of what's happening in his own country. And so I guess that also allows me to use the word honest. I think Steve Paikin comes at it honestly, and I think people respect that ultimately. So he's got a reasonableness, and he's trying to do it as honestly as he can to the degree he's permitted to do. And for lots of people, I think that's enough. Like, if somebody wanted to show me something that has like Steve Paikin doing anything outrageous, I'll look at it. But I don't think I've ever seen anything like that. I think the reasonableness and the honest desire to kind of capture the spirit of his own country and to take seriously like something like the basic income. Like Steve Bacon has had lots of people on his show talking about the basic income. I actually think a big reason why the Liberal Party, people within the Liberal Party, are so pro basic income is because of Stephen Bacon's work and because of the interviews that he had with pro basic income people. So, anyway. Yeah, it's a weird alliance in the Green Party. I don't see why they exist in the first place since they're just eco-capitalists. Well, and their positions have been co-opted, right? Like, they made sense back when Mulrooney was in power, right? When it was like Mulrooney and then Chrétien and then Martin, then Ignatieff, then Stephen Harper, right? Like, that era there, yeah, Green Party makes all the sense in the world. Pound the drum. Environmentalism. Pound the drum. But now, like, their issues have been co-opted by all the other major parties. Even the Conservatives are starting to talk this way, even though the voting members of the Conservative Party don't. But the leadership in the Conservative Party certainly talks that way. So the eco-capitalist angle is gone. They don't have that issue. And then their other big issue, which was introduced later on, was the basic income. But that's been co-opted by the NDP and even the Liberals to a degree, right? So what do the Greens exist for? What's the reason for their existence? And there is an argument to be said that like the Greens and the NDP could amalgamate. They could find a path to becoming to unionizing with one another, not unionizing, but to allying with one another in more serious ways. Like the conservatives, the progressive conservatives, and the Reform Party did. Yeah, liberals maintain power within the immigrant community, especially those from India, China, and Venezuela. Yeah, because like these people don't, like the people who are immigrating, they don't know what the system is. Literally, all they know is I am here because of policies passed by that guy. Right? And so of course they're going to support that person. And because they're new here, they don't want to upset anything. They don't want to, they're not here to capture a revolution, right? They're running away from war. Wars we create, and wars we maintain, and wars we sell weapons to. But, and lots and lots of people who are coming from these places don't have that kind of critique. They don't actually have a critique of Canada, because they've been spending all their time just trying to survive and live a life, right? So they don't have this critique that accurately shows Canada for what it is on the world stage, right? They're just trying to live a life, and all they know is I'm here because that guy's there, and this place seems nice. The place I was leaving was falling into a shithole. What are you talking about? There are sanctions. Like, I don't know anything about that. I've literally talked to people from Venezuela, like, who are from Venezuela, and I will be like, you do know that the United States has put like major sanctions on that on Venezuela, right? And they're like, I don't know what you're talking about, because they don't. I know a lot of conservative Venezuelans. Sadly, they live in Florida. They'd live in Florida if they could, honestly. Well, it makes total sense. Like, oh, you're telling me that the people who have the resources to leave here and migrate to here are the people who had money? Shocker. Oh, you're telling me that the people who are actually making it to Canada are actually the wealthy people who are leaving those countries. Oh yeah, big shocker that the wealthy people who would leave Venezuela are going to say, oh yeah, that Nicolas Maduro, what a horrible person he is for wanting to feed and shelter his own population. Like, of course they're going to say that. They're rich. Else they wouldn't be in Canada. I remember like 20, 30 years ago, a lot of people had hobbies just because they enjoyed doing it. Like my mother painted. Yeah. Well, and they had time. They had time to do it. Right? Nobody's got time anymore. Who's got time to do any of this shit? We got to work 2 jobs so that we can just like buy food while we sleep in a tent. Right? Like, we don't have time for this shit. Everybody's working their asses off. Productivity's gone through the roof. Wages, real wages have declined significantly. So nobody's got time to even, like, all we literally can do is flop down on a couch and watch TV because we don't have the energy for it anymore. We just don't have energy for this shit anymore. Yeah, you literally said that just right after. I guess so. His wife is a conservative, so I assume he is as well. Yeah. I believe the unaffordability of urban housing is suppressing new, interesting music scenes from emerging as they did in the past. Yep. Like, I remember one time somebody said, like, well, what in the 60s there was all this revolutionary music, right? Well, where is that music now? It's like, your artists are working at Starbucks. That is what is happening, right? The price of, the cost of living has gone through the roof. The people don't have time. People can't just spend time at the bar playing a guitar, right? They can't do it. They literally have to work their lives away for basic necessities, and like as early as 30 years ago, right? 30 years ago, 40 years ago, like if you were 30 and you had worked a job, you could buy a house. That's gone. It's totally gone. I've been listening to the hashtag Ontario Poly podcast, and he's been recently praising Ford, and it's weird. Yeah. People are weird. Like, and the, Ford understands, like, and don't fool yourself, man. Like, people can be bought. You can buy people. Everybody's got a price. And you're gonna find out that price is much lower than you actually think it is. It's much lower than you actually think it is. And like lots of times people will just start to gravitate towards power because they have power, right? So maybe the guy doing this podcast is just like, oh, Doug Ford's got power. Well, you know, and they'll fool themselves. They'll say like, okay, well, for the sake of being neutral, or for the sake of objectivity, there's the word. For the sake of objectivity, right? Well, I can't just say bad things about a rampaging sociopath who's trying to kill everybody. I gotta find something nice to say, right? And also, like, Doug Ford and his crew have done a good job of succoring people. Like, remember this Arthur story? You remember this? Where Doug Ford comes out and he starts talking about Arthur, right? This kid, he tells this story. Are you kidding me? They're trying to turn Doug Ford into a big cuddly oaf. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to make Doug Ford into just like this kind of innocuous lump of like oafishness, right? It's exactly what they did with Reagan, right? That Reagan was just like a lovable, likable, stand up for America, you know, good kind of man. But then behind the scenes, he's a fucking nightmare sociopath. Let's go bomb these places, right? And again, Canadians are extremely gullible, right? Oh, there you go. Steve Bacon's podcast. My bad. But yeah, like, and Canadians are extremely gullible, right? We're able to be fooled. Yeah, remember when it was cool to kill fascists? Remember when, if you knew a guy who actually killed a Nazi, you had respect for him? You thought to yourself, oh yeah, good, he killed a Nazi. Excellent. That means I think he's a better person, right? Where'd that go? Why did it suddenly become a bad idea to kill Nazis, right? Why is it such a bad thing to fucking pick up a gun and shoot a fucking Nazi? Like, if I found out that somebody I knew, like, if I found out I shouldn't say this. I shouldn't say this. Just like, people who killed Nazis used to be war heroes. And that would be my perspective today as well. There you go. That's the nice way of saying it. Ugh. Look at that. I caught up to the chat. Look at that. Holy shit. That was a big, long discussion. When someone tries to get you caught up in their bourgeoisie capitalist money-making scam, I am not getting caught up in your bourgeoisie capitalist money-making scam. That's hilarious, dude. I love that. I love it when I see that kind of shit. Oh, Ontario is speeding up second shots in areas with Delta variant. Good. Yeah, that's a smart thing to do. Anyone who got a shot on or before May 9th will be eligible for a second shot. That Delta variant is scary. It's scaring the shit out of a lot of people. Because, like, that narrative of, like, a variant just sidestepping the vaccine, right? That a variant comes in and it's just like, oh, that vaccine didn't work, right? Scary. Scares a lot of people. Rightfully. Which is why we're going to completely fucking ignore it and open everything up anyway, so.
If we break the total population of Canada down into a representative group of 100 people, the richest on the right, the poorest on the left, here's what it looks like when we distribute the total wealth of all Canadians. That's roughly $8 trillion in 2012, distributed according to how Canadians think wealth should be divided. This looks pretty good. Now, here's how Canadians think wealth is actually distributed in Canada. In short, a lot more unequal. The most alarming thing about these results is that Canadians vastly underestimate the actual level of wealth inequality in Canada. Canada is now a place where the richest 86 families own more than the bottom 11 million people combined. Canada wasn't always this unequal. We got here because of the political choices we've made. Our social spending has been reduced dramatically since the 1980s.
So that comes from the Broadbent Institute. I highly advise everybody to go find the actual, it's easy to find, just literally Broadbent Institute Wealth Inequality. You'll find this video. This is a heavily edited version of it, but probably one of the most important videos that has been made on the issue of wealth equality in Canada, period. Like, period, full stop. I don't say that lightly. Like, it's a very, very crisp, informative video. Immigrants are right-wingers because they want to make money. Old people are conservative because the poor people die off. Old people are conservative because the poor people die off. Oh, I see what you're saying there. So, like, the only old people that can survive the capitalist system are the ones who have the money to do it. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I see what you're saying there. And I mean, to have a little bit of a lighter touch there, I do think that, like, immigrants just want to make their way. They just kind of want to put their, like, they've seen enough. They've had enough, right? That they have been told this narrative that, oh, we can slide all our chips on over here. And, like, they'll take the money that they've made from, like, Venezuela, because they're the wealthy people, right? And they'll buy a piece of property or something and have, like, a convenience store, right? Yeah, they're trying to move on. Well, and that really does capture the spirit of the age, right? That, like, there's a recent poll that was done that shows that people are starting to feel more positive about what's happening. That positivity is starting to increase in the populace. And what that tells me is that people are ready for this to be over. They're ready for this to be over, and they want it to be over. They don't want to talk about it anymore. They want it to be done. Which I can respect. I can respect that position. I'm not mad about it. Like, I think that it's much more difficult and complex than that, but I get it. Yeah, unions warn they will not be muted as Doug Ford invokes notwithstanding clause to limit their electoral spending. Like, what a scumbag this guy is. Whoever supports this guy should be spit on. Like, it really is that simple. Like, if I find out that somebody's voting for this guy, I'm just going to spit on them. Anyway, guys, with that said, finally, that's the end of this one. This was a really nice one, guys. I really enjoyed it. What a great chat that was. You guys are so great, and I love your commentary and questions. Yeah, I'm so worried people are going to forget about the pandemic and Doug's response. Yeah. Well, and that's why we got to bring it to him. Bring it to him, right? You all are doing really wonderfully out there. Never forget that, okay? Always remember that these billionaires are spending billions of dollars to gaslight you, right? They want to convince you that you are less than what you are, which is a divine being standing in divine energy. I wish we'd remember. I wish we'd remember that that's the case. All right, guys. Good luck. We're going to need it.